Chapter 781, An Island of Trains. At the Disney Castle we were with King Mickey. PJ was there to visit his dad in prison. After being locked up for his crimes against the universe, Pete was left to realize the error of his ways by rotting in a cell. So Pete is feeling guilt over all the pain and suffering he caused. Hey? Nico, I'll believe that when I see it. Mickey, you will. PJ, are you sure you want to talk to your dad about this? PJ, I'm positive, JD. I want to tell my father that I forgive him for his crimes, but it's gonna take a while for him to earn back my trust. We have all the time in the world, PJ. We went down into the dungeon and we saw Pete in his cell. However, instead of him being in his clothes like we saw before, he was now in an orange prison jumpsuit. And orange is the new black. Mickey, Pete, you have some visitors. Pete saw us. PJ, hey there, Dad. Pete, aw PJ. It's so nice to see you here. But Pete saw us. Pete, you got my son involved in this. How do you all sleep at night? Ed, I like to sleep at night with a nice pillow while eating buttered toast and gravy. Eddie, shut up, Ed. Pete, we're not here to insult you. We have PJ here because he has something to tell you. PJ, to Pete, look, Dad. I forgive you for what you did. You're my father and nothing will ever change that. But my trust is something you'll have to earn back. Pete, I understand, son. I've done a lot of terrible things I'm not proud of. But I never meant to hurt you at all. You're my son, PJ, and I will always love you no matter what. PJ, I love you too, Dad. They hugged even though prison bars were in their way, they still love each other. Sora, well, Pete. I hope this makes us even. We've reduced your prison sentence to 10 years. But after that, you better not commit any more crimes. Pete, it does, Sora. And I promise. Because if you do commit any more crimes. I made the finger gesture that said I will kill you. I slid my finger across my neck. The warning will stick, and I also made the gesture that said I'm watching you. Asterisk asterisk asterisk. Later, over the eastern Atlantic Ocean we were flying to an island located right next to England. It was an island that was well known throughout all the children in the world in books, games, and movies and on TV. It was the island of Sodier from Thomas the Tank Engine and Friends. One of my favorite childhood shows from my past. Nico, so we're heading to the island that is home to Thomas the Tank Engine and all his friends? Awesome. I know. It's like we're gonna be visiting one of the awesome lands of my childhood. Lana, I love Thomas the Tank Engine. Lincoln introduced me to that show and it's what made me want to be a handyman. Lincoln? Yep. It was back when Lana was around 3 that I showed it to her. Lainey, I remember that. That was so adorable that you did that, Lincoln. Lori, it was literally the cutest time. Lenny, totes. Luna, it was rockin' dudes. Luan, it sure was a chuchin' good time. Laughs to rimshot, get it? Most of us laughed but everyone sighed. Laughs, that was a good one. Eddie, laughs, that was funny. We landed and Gordon the big express engine saw us. Gordon, Team Loud Phoenix Storm. It's such an honor. Gordon the big engine, it's an honor too. I love all you guys in my childhood. Most of us all do. Thomas the Tank Engine came. Thomas, it's such an honor to meet you all. You too, Thomas. Lana, I love all you guys. You guys are the reason why I got into the handyman business and I love all you guys. Thomas, I'm honored that you love us. Lana. James, TTTF, I'm honored too. Emily, we have so many fans around the world. I used to watch all you guys all the time back when I was little. I was only 4 when I was watching you and it feels like so long ago. Thomas, I'm sure it does. Henry, it sure does feel like a long time, hey? Toby, yet it does. Me, but what I can't stand most of all is all you guys having to deal with those troublesome trucks. Lola, yet. They are a major nuisance. Lana, I hate those trucks. Thomas, so you all came here to help stop them once and for all. Me, if you would like. Thomas, we would be so honored. JD. Percy, we'll gladly help you out. Emily, count us all in. Astro Train, I'll help out too. It's been a long time since I've used my train form. Me, awesome. It'll be great working with our favorite childhood stars. Let's split into 12 groups and go after the troublesome trucks. Nico, good idea. Vince, nice. Carol, this is gonna be so awesome. Me, it sure is. We'll call Thomas and all his friends the Railway Help Brigade. Thomas, I like it. James, alright, guys. This is the part where you do some combo attacks and final smashes to take out the troublesome trucks. Go for it. Double D, not this time, James. James, say what? Double D, the troublesome trucks are only nuisances at best. So all we have to do is go around Sodier to round them up. Thomas, where should we meet after getting all the troublesome trucks? Me, back here at the station. We're gonna throw those trucks in jail for causing all kinds of trouble. Let's ride the rails. We cheered. California, here I come plays. We were off. We had special incarceration carts with us and we built a special railroad impound lot for the bad trucks. Asterisk asterisk asterisk. Percy the Small Engine, William, Boone Dixon, Shago, Luan, and Winx Club Stella. Asterisk asterisk asterisk. Percy the Small Engine was riding down the rail with Luan, William, Boone Dixon, and Stella of the Winx Club. Percy was most likely built by the Avonside Engine Company sometime around the 1900s and had a subsequent rebuild in the period before he was sold second-hand to the Northwestern Railway by a factory on the mainland. He is said to have been found to contain Hunslet parts, among others, according to workers at Crovan's Gate. When Gordon, James, and Henry went on strike in protest of extra work after Thomas's departure to run his branch line, the Fat Controller decided the railway needed another tank engine. At the engine workshop, the Fat Controller saw a green saddle tank. When the engine confirmed he was willing to work hard, the Fat Controller bought him and named him Percy. Bringing him back to Sodier, Percy was charged with running the branch line while Thomas ran the main line with Edward and was allowed to stay after the big engines surrendered and returned to work. At first, Percy liked to annoy the big engines. Percy was later waiting at Knapford, but forgot to whistle to the signalman and thus was startled when Gordon came running towards him with the express. Gordon managed to stop in time, but Percy was so frightened, he ran away and ended up stuck in a sandbank. He was rescued by Gordon and took up the duty of station pilot at Tidmouth. Percy was still a cheeky engine and often liked to play jokes on Gordon and James, but one day the other engines got their revenge when Percy failed to recognize a backing signal. After this, Percy was subject to bullying from the big engines until Duck arrived and helped Percy to put the big engines in their place, although Percy still received a reprimand from the Fat Controller for it. With Duck's arrival, Percy was sent to Thomas's branch line to help build Knapford Harbor and has stayed there ever since as a goods engine. He met a self-centered white helicopter named Harold who said that railways were slow and out of date, so he decided to race him, of which he won. When Percy had to take the Sunday school children home, he came across a flooded paddock which swashed away his fire. Thankfully, with a little help from Harold, who had dropped supplies of hot drinks for his crew and the passengers, he was able to get the children home. Despite being really useful, Percy was prone to having accidents, sometimes for acting naughty and others for carelessness. He was naughty when he asked the trucks to push him past a danger notice, only to end up in the water until he could be lifted out and taken to the works by Henry. When a diesel railcar named Daisy came to look after Thomas's branch line, she constantly kept leaving behind the milk van every time Percy shunted it for her. Fed up with taking the milk for her, Percy offered to take Toby's trucks for him while he took the milk. However, the trucks were unfamiliar with Percy, and when he ordered them about, they decided to seek revenge by pushing him onto a line of stone trucks. One winter, the cold was severely getting to Percy, so he tried to think about warm things. As a result, his workday led to Percy obsessing over scarves and seeing everyone around him wearing them. Henry remarked on the silliness of an engine wanting a scarf, but Percy bit back with a comment about Henry's funnel size. The cold did not affect Percy's cheekiness, however, as he planned on startling the coaches by coming in quietly. However, the porters did not hear him either, and Percy crashed into their luggage trolley, ending up covered in jam with the Fat Controller's hat on Percy's lamp iron and his best trousers wrapped around Percy's funnel. James joked that Percy found a scarf after all and ran off to tell Henry. That night, Thomas and a clean Percy prepared to go to sleep, happy that the firelighter had agreed to arrive earlier the next day. Henry and Percy make up, and Henry assures Percy that the weather will be warmer the following day. In Tale of the Brave, Thomas told Percy about some mysterious footprints that he saw at the China clay pits. Percy convinced himself that the footprints were that of a monster that was roaming Sodier. Continuing to be anxious for a few days, he caused lots of confusion and delay, such as mistakenly referring to Gator, the new engine, as the monster, failing to deliver his mail on time, and running off before the Fat Controller finished talking to him. After talking with his new friend Gator, he understood what being brave is like and later used this courage to save James from a huge landslide. He later learned that the monster was really a dinosaur a long time ago, which had now become a fossil. He also understood that the footprints Thomas saw were also only fossils left from the dinosaur. Percy later said goodbye to Gator, who had to return to the mainland, but the two friends were certain they would meet again someday. In the 18th series, Percy was starting to miss Gator and tried to forget him by working hard and not think about him. When he had to deliver trucks full of precious sculptures and paintings for a special exhibition, he did not stop to be coupled, and the troublesome trucks went rolling to the old mine. He thought about Gator and his advice of how to be brave. Percy went into the mine and rescued the trucks. Percy soon reunited with Gator at Christmas. In the 19th series, he was to take the mayor of Sodier to the Search and Rescue Center to present a new alarm bell to celebrate their 1000th rescue. Diesel overheard Percy talking about it at the docks, and he played a trick on him, sending Percy to the old quarry, which resulted him ending up on a badly flooded railway line, and after Diesel unsuccessfully attempted to pull him out of the flood, he too also ended up getting stuck in the water after it badly damaged his generator. The rescue of Diesel and Percy marked the Sodier Search and Rescue Center crew's 1001st rescue. He was once giving the job of transporting Farmer McColl's ewes to a fair at Maithwaite, however he was late delivering that night's mail. Rushing to get back on time, he bashed his livestock wagon into a flatbed and unknowingly created a hole in it. He collected the sheep from McCall Farm, but every time he stopped, some of the sheep escaped. By the time he had reached the fair, all the sheep had escaped. Fortunately, Thomas, Annie and Clarabelle arrived shortly afterwards with the sheep, much to Percy's relief. Once, he saw some painters at Knapp Ford, talking about Sir Topham Hatt leaving. After he told Thomas and the other engines, they came to the conclusion he was leaving Sodier because of them, so they decided to create no confusion and delay until he decided to stay. By the end of the day, it appeared their plan was successful, though Percy still had his doubts. His suspicions were seemingly confirmed when he saw the painters clearing out the Fat Controller's office. Now, believing the Fat Controller was being forced to leave, the engines decided to go on strike until he was allowed to stay. After much confusion and delay, the Fat Controller explained to the engines that he was just moving to a temporary office while his was being redecorated. With the misunderstanding cleared up, Percy and the other engines worked hard to get the railway back on schedule. In the 20th series, he had the job of taking the Christmas mail to Vickerstown for Hero to take to the mainland and onwards to the North Pole. Harold offered to help, but Percy refused, determined to complete the job on his own. After he left a bag of letters behind at Dryaw, Harold chased after him, but Percy, believing he was just mocking his speed, refused to stop and crashed into a snowdrift at a tunnel. Stuck, he reluctantly agreed to let Harold deliver the mail. The following day, he heard from Toby that Harold had not returned to Sodier that night, so he raced off to the mainland to find him. He found him stuck in a field and out of fuel. Not wanting Harold to spend Christmas stranded and alone, he fetched his fuel and the two returned to Sodier. Later, Percy was taking the mail train at night, when he came across the watermill bridge and heard a moaning sound which gave him a fright. Percy later told Thomas and Toby about it, and remembering the story of the 3 billy goats gruff, he thought it was a troll that lives under the bridge. The 3 engines reluctantly crossed the bridge and discovered it was only a lost cow. He was also the only engine to be nice to Hugo, who was being shunned as the others thought he had come to replace them. He would then see a zeppelin in the sky and question how Hugo could be in the sky as well as on the rails. In the Great Race, Percy took Thomas's place in the shunting competition of the Great Railway Show after Thomas had an accident and was left on Sodier. However, Thomas managed to make it to the mainland after all, and Percy dropped out of the competition so his best friend could compete, and because he did not want to compete in the first place. In the 21st series, Percy became confused because of the new PA system which was not working properly. Because of this, he ended up taking a delivery of pigs to Lord Callan at Callan Castle. He was also told by Dowager Hat to pull Gordon's Express instead of Gordon doing so, but because he was not strong enough to pull it, he got stuck on Gordon's Hill and ended up severely delayed. In the 22nd series, when Merlin first came to Sodier, Percy thought everyone was talking about how Merlin is an invisible engine, so that why Percy hadn't seen him. He looked everywhere for the invisible engine until he met up with Merlin, who did not get a chance to introduce himself, and heard what he believed was the invisible engine's whistle, rushed off to tell Thomas about hearing what he thought was Merlin's whistle, but unknown to Percy, it just turned out to be Trevor. In the film, Percy overheard Mr. Conductor talking in his sleep. Later, he arrived at Knapford with his mail train. He told Thomas about Mr. Conductor and concluded that he travels on Sodier to the Magic Railroad. Thomas told Percy about the missing truck and realized that the buffers leading to the Magic Railroad, and told Percy to guard the buffers to be a brave engine. Sometime afterwards, Percy found Splatter and Dodge at the Magic Buffers and raced to warn Thomas, telling him to get Lily back to Muffle Mountain before Diesel 10 destroyed the Magic Railroad. Percy was last seen pulling a goods train during the chase between Lady, Thomas, and Diesel 10, when the 3 engines passed over Bulgy's Bridge. Percy, it's such an honor to have you all here with us. Lewin, thanks Percy. You are my favorite engine when I first watched you all. Percy, I'm so honored. Lewin. William, we didn't watch you guys all the time when we went to Cadoc in France, and I'm sorry about that. Percy, it's all right. William. Shago, weren't you with Dr. Draken? Shago, I was. My friend Maria showed me the error of my ways and she helped me see what a horrible person I was. I'm now on Team Loud Phoenix Storm's Redemption Squad. Percy, that's awesome. I'm so glad you changed. Shago, thanks Percy. Stella of the Winx Club was in her Enchantix form and she was flying beside them. Stella, this is so awesome working with you. Percy, thanks Stella. I like working with you all too. In the mountains of the island of Sodier they found one of the troublesome trucks. They were getting rocks and stones from the mountains. Percy, hold it right there you delinquent. 7-plank truck, well if it isn't Percy. Percy, your days of mischief are over forever. 7-plank truck, and what are you gonna do about it, you tin can? Percy, oh it's not me that's doing anything. Lewin, it's us. William, let's get him. Stella and Lewin lifted the 7-plank truck off the rail and dumped out the rocks and they put him on the cart. Percy, you have a lot to answer for when we get back you punk. Asterisk asterisk asterisk. Emily, Luna, Matt Daniels, Maria, Bize, and Irma. Asterisk asterisk asterisk. Emily had Luna, Matt Daniels, Bize, and Irma with her. When Emily was new to Sodier, she was ignored by the other engines for borrowing and pulling Annie and Clarabelle without Thomas's permission or knowledge. The matter was resolved after she saved both Thomas and Oliver from nearly having a nasty accident on the crosspoints, and she was rewarded with 2 new coaches. Emily proved to be kind-hearted, as she was the only engine concerned about Henry when he was ill due to leaky tubes, and when she stuck up for Salty when Thomas and Percy were teasing him. However, Emily has proven to be a nuisance on occasion, as she bossed everyone about when they were clearing up after a storm, Thomas when taking passengers and Percy when shunting trucks. When pulling the express for the first time, she was determined to keep to Gordon's timing, only to run out of water. Later on she was assigned to the flour mill, while James was assigned to the Misty Valley branch line, primarily the Black Lock. James told her that there was a monster in the lock. She had trouble with the flour mill and ended up crashing some trucks off the line. She was later reassigned to the Misty Valley branch line, replacing James. She discovered that the monster was just a family of seals. She is presumed to still work the line, as it has never been stated otherwise. When Thomas had to stay at Knapp Ford Sheds, Emily did not like his company at first, as she did not want any noise. She just wanted some sleep. However, she learned how comfortable it is to have the company of friends, and once Tidmouth Sheds was rebuilt, she was transferred there to be with her new shed mates. Like most engines, Emily can get quite puffed up in the smoke box. When she was called Excellent Emily, she ignored the advice of Murdoch, Thomas, and Duck, only to get herself into trouble. Afterwards, she took their advice to get her job done. Emily tries her best to make her friends happy. When she assumed that Mavis was sad, she took flowers to the quarry, but only created a mess. When she tried to help her friends with the football/soccer match, she neglected to fetch the dirty washing, which turned out to be the football/soccer team's uniforms. Also, when the Fat Controller lost his top hat, Emily went to find it without success and then took the special Christmas train without permission. However, she made amends for her friend's sake. She later took Paxton to the Vickerstown Diesel Works after he was damaged during an accident at the Blue Mountain Quarry. When Thomas hit his snowplow, Emily had to do Thomas's work and saved him when he got stuck in the snow again. Thomas told Emily about the flatbeds of fear, but Emily did not believe in it and said there was a sensible explanation. She eventually believed in it, until Thomas told her that it was just one of Salty's tall tales. Later, she was very excited to collect a special, which was a giant model of a globe of the world, to take it to the animal park. However, it accidentally fell off and she spent some time getting after it. When the steam team tried to clear the tracks of snow for Connor to deliver the last train for Christmas, Emily was unable to clear them from the Sodier side, but was happy to see Hero as he cleared it from the other direction, then was disappointed when they mistook Harold for Father Christmas by believing his red port lamp to be Rudolph's nose. She was later informed by Paxton about the rumor that Toby was to be scrapped, but Henrietta overheard and knew it was not true. Emily took her to find Toby, and once they found him safe, Emily gave him some of her coal. When Henry confided in Emily that he feared catching chicken pox from Stephen and Bridget Hatt, she assured him that he could not get chicken pox, joking that he worries too much. She became fascinated with Caitlin being able to go at such high speeds and wondered what it would be like to be fast, becoming depressed when she could not do so. However, in the end, she managed to save Caitlin when she descended down a steep hill with broken brakes. When Thomas was fed up with Diesel's selfishness during the holidays, Emily partook in Thomas's plan to mend the Diesel's ways, much to her joy and amusement. She later attended the Earl's Christmas lunch with several other engines, including Thomas, and a reformed Diesel. Emily went with the other Sodier engines to be part of the Great Railway Show, competing in the Best Decorated Engine Parade along with James, Carlos, Rajiv, and Young Bayo, but she and James lost to Rajiv. After Percy dropped out of the shunting challenge, she encouraged Thomas to take his place, declaring him Sodier's last chance to win. Once, when the Fat Controller was ill, Dowager Hatt took charge of the railway. She assigned Emily to Thomas's job of pulling Annie and Clarabelle, while Gordon was assigned to her job of taking scrap to the scrapyards. This resulted in lots of confusion and delay, culminating with a massive hold-up outside of Knapford. Emily pointed this out to the Dowager and was able to help her get things back on track before the Fat Controller returned. Later, she helped Donald and Douglas pull a heavy train of steel pipes to Vicarstown, but the journey became difficult when the twins kept teasing each other and arguing about swapping places. When they stopped on Gordon's Hill, Emily was left holding the train while Donald and Douglas continued to bicker. Eventually, Emily slipped down the hill and was knocked off the rails by a giant, heavy snowball, which had formed from a lump of coal shaken out of Donald's tender when Douglas bumped him. Once Harvey had cleared up the mess, Emily took the front while both twins pushed and they reached Vicarstown without any further trouble. Some time later, it was discovered that Thomas had mysteriously vanished off the island of Sodier. As the Fat Controller began a desperate search for Thomas, Emily went down to Brendam Docks, where Carly revealed she loaded Thomas onto a ship only a short while ago. Emily rushed back to Knapford to tell the Fat Controller, who became more frantic when he realized that if Thomas had left Sodier by ship, he could have been anywhere in the world by that point. Emily joined the search in the hopes of Thomas still being on Sodier, but returned to Tidmouth Sheds that night to look on with deep worry as Thomas's berth remains empty, his whereabouts unknown. However, when Mr. Percival received word a few days later from a signalman on the Indian Railway that Thomas had been spotted there and was returning to Sodier via the mainland through Asia and Europe, Emily was waiting at Knapford Station alongside the other engines, residents, and friends to welcome him home, along with meeting Thomas's new friend Nia, who would be living with them on the Northwestern Railway as her shed in Kenya had been demolished and Thomas invited her to live and work on the Northwestern from now on. Later on, Emily had been assigned to pick up the new boiler for the Sodier Animal Park from Brendam Docks when the old one broke down. However, when she noticed the ship had not come into port yet, she asked Carly where it was, only for Carly to reply that the snowstorm was causing the ships to be delayed reaching their destinations, and the boiler may not arrive until after Christmas. Thomas, overhearing this, rushed off to notify the Fat Controller of the situation. Emily returned to Tidmouth Sheds later that evening with the rest of the steam team, only to be amazed when Thomas arrived with the animals from the animal park, explaining that he was unable to reach the steam works as originally instructed by the Fat Controller, and brought the animals here where they could stay warm through the steam team's boilers. Although Gordon and James were against the idea, Emily, Nia, Rebecca, and Percy were all for it. The next morning, which was Christmas, the Fat Controller arrived at the sheds, and was shocked when he found the animals inside with the steam team and their crews. However, he then revealed that the new boiler for the animal park had arrived, and the animals could return home soon. Emily and the other engines shared a laugh when one of the ostriches snatched the Fat Controller's top hat to wear itself, much to his annoyance. When a heavy fog descended on the island, Emily nearly had a head-on collision with Gordon as he pulled out of Knapford railway station with the express, before actually hitting him and pushing him backwards when she was rammed from behind by Rebecca when her brakes failed again to stop her in time. As a result, the Fat Controller advised her and the rest of the steam team to be careful in the fog, having Cyril the fogman place detonators on the rails to warn them that they were approaching signals and to slow down to avoid an accident. Emily later attended Sir Robert Norramby's fireworks show at Ulfstead Castle with Thomas and Rebecca, soon joined by Samson, who was able to conquer his fear of fireworks, and Bradford. Luna, it's so awesome riding the rails with you, Emily. Emily, I'm glad you're having fun, Luna. I heard JD sang a song for you with Mick Swagger on Christmas 3 years ago. Luna, he sure did. That was the best Christmas gift I've ever gotten from him. Matt Daniels, you're a fan of Mick Swagger, Luna? Luna, I sure am, dude. He's my idol. Matt Daniels, I'm a fan of Mick Swagger too, Dodette. Luna, rockin'. Irma and Biza were flying beside them. Irma, Luna is an awesome musical inspiration and she loves all music. Biza, she sure does. They arrived in a hilly area. Maria, now, if I was a troublesome truck, where would I hide? They saw one of the short wheelbase trucks hauling rocks and pebbles. Emily, hold it right there, punk. Short truck, well, if it isn't Emily the tin tube. Emily, your days of causing mischief are over for good. Short truck, who's gonna stop me? Irma, we are. Irma, Luna, and Biza fired a powerful blast of water and it lifted the short truck up and put him on the incarceration bed. Emily, you have a lot to answer for. Asterisk asterisk asterisk. Thomas the Tank Engine, JD. Nico, May, Lincoln, Lizzie Morris, Luke Morris, Clay, Goosebumps, Shocker, Elena, and Willow. Asterisk asterisk asterisk. Thomas the Tank Engine, me, Lincoln, Lizzie Morris, Luke Morris, Clay, Goosebumps, Shocker, Elena, and Will were riding the rails. Details of Thomas's arrival on the Northwestern Railway in 1915 are mostly undocumented and it is unknown exactly how he turned up on Sodier. The most popular theory put forward, however, is that he was sent to Sodier in a wartime mix-up. His driver and fireman got along well with the local people and married Sodrian women. By 1920, neither one wanted to leave the island or their beloved engine. During an inquiry, Topham Hatt found out that the LB and SCR had written off Thomas as being lost on war service. Rather than face complications resulting from a change in their books, the LB and SCR quietly sold Thomas to the Northwestern Railway for a nominal sum. Thomas originally worked as the station pilot at Vickerstown, shunting trains for the bigger engines on the main line to take out. He enjoyed teasing the other engines, especially Gordon, who he would quietly sneak up on and whistle loudly at while Gordon dozed on a siding. Eventually, Gordon managed to get back at Thomas by pulling out of the station before he could be uncoupled from his coaches, dragging him down the line at a tremendous speed. Thomas vowed to never tease Gordon again. Perhaps as a result of his brief excursion beyond his boundaries, Thomas longed to see more of the world and become a part of it and became jealous of the bigger engines for having the chance to pull trains. On an occasion when Henry fell ill, Thomas took his morning passenger train since there were no other engines available, much to his delight. However, for unknown reasons, Thomas left the station before he could be coupled to his train, leaving behind the coaches, the passengers, and their luggage. Thomas was not aware of his mistake until he was stopped by a signalman who asked where his train was. Ashamed and humiliated, Thomas returned to the station and collected his coaches. Subsequently, the incident made him a laughing stock among the other engines. Thomas continued to grumble to the other engines, though they took no notice of him. However, Edward felt sorry for him and allowed him to take his goods train to Wellsworth while he handled his shunting duties in the yard. Although Edward warned him to be careful around the trucks, Thomas took no notice and bumped the trucks as he started. When they reached Gordon's Hill, the trucks pushed him down the line, causing him to lose control. Thomas raced through Maron Station and came to a stop, where he was confronted by the fat controller. Sometime after this, Thomas was relocated to Wellsworth to learn more about handling trucks. Thomas was present in the yard when James ran out of control with his trucks and derailed in a field outside the station. Thomas fetched the breakdown train and rushed to James' aid, and he helped to clean up the broken trucks and bring James back to the shed when he was derailed. As a reward for his actions, Thomas was given 2 new coaches, Annie and Clarabelle, and was given the responsibility of running the Farquhar branch line, much to his delight. Thomas loved his branch line dearly and had many adventures during his first days on the line. He once left his guard behind by accident, and on another occasion he accidentally swallowed a fish in his tank when he took on water from the lake, causing him tremendous pain. During the autumn series, Thomas met Terrence and teased him for his caterpillar tracks, though he later came to regret this after he became stuck in the snow and had to be pulled out by him. Thomas later met Bertie and was challenged to a race to Farquhar. Although he was behind for most of the race, Thomas managed to overtake Bertie and won. After a compliment by his driver went to his smoke box, Thomas became conceited, believing that he no longer needed his driver to control him. The next morning, Thomas found himself moving on his own after a careless cleaner had meddled with his controls, but he was unable to stop and crashed into the Farquhar station master's house. Thomas was sent to the works to be mended and received some changes to his design, including a new footplate that was now level from smokebox to bunker. When Thomas returned to the branch line, he began looking after the passenger trains with Daisy. In 1990, Thomas was invited by the National Railway Museum to represent the Northwestern Railway in the Great Railway Show, an event showcasing many famous engines across the UK. Thomas was excited, but the journey to York was shaky. He damaged his front buffer beam when he hit a crossing gate and the lorry he was traveling on was booked for parking illegally. Thomas was repaired when he arrived at the museum and befriended Green Arrow while he was being mended, though he continued to have bad luck when he ran into a bag thrown onto the line and frightened a small child. Fortunately, Thomas managed to make up for his bad luck when, as he was double-heading a rail tour with Green Arrow, he noticed the line up ahead was damaged and stopped the train. As a reward for his actions, Thomas was made an honorary member of the National Railway Museum and received a commemorative plaque. Afterwards, Thomas left York and returned to Sodier. In 1995, during the Golden Jubilee of the Railway series, Thomas derailed on his branch line after rabbits had been undermining the track. He was resistant and managed to attend the Jubilee at Tidmouth, albeit after being delayed at Knapford Junction after a points and signal failure. In 2007, during which Toby was having to handle the overflow of quarry workers, Thomas discovered an old carriage named Victoria, who he asked to be restored and help Toby. He brought her up from the junction to Farquhar to meet Toby, after having to bypass Terrence's toppled cart that had nearly blocked the line. In 2011, Thomas had been crossing the river bridge near Elsbridge, when he was forced to stop due to an injured swan laying on the rails. He escorted it to Farquhar where it was taken to a vet, and after recovery Thomas brought it back to Elsbridge where the swan was freed. Later, he attended the Thin Clergyman's Centenary. Before coming to Sodier, Thomas lived at Brighton, where he worked alongside several other engines. He was brought to the Northwestern Railway when the Fat Controller was in need of a new tank engine to shunt trains at Knapford and was originally painted teal green before receiving his blue livery. Thomas was cheeky at first and enjoyed teasing Gordon by waking him up while he was resting at Knapford. Gordon managed to get back at Thomas by leaving the station too quickly before he could be uncoupled, and though Thomas learned his lesson about teasing Gordon, he wanted to see more of the world and go beyond the yard at Knapford station. He was given the chance to pull his first passenger train when Henry became ill but left the station too early when he mistook the guard's whistle for Edward's train for his own, leaving behind his coaches and passengers. Thomas was stopped by a signalman and he went back to the station to fetch his train. Thomas was teased relentlessly about this mistake by Gordon and James, though Edward felt sorry for him and offered to let Thomas take his goods train while he took care of his shunting duties in the yard. Thomas could hardly contain his excitement and was too excited to listen to Edward's warning about the trucks, believing that he could handle them easily. However, as he reached the top of Gordon's Hill, the trucks began pushing Thomas down the line, causing him to run out of control and nearly crashed until he stopped in a siding. Upon noticing that Henry had not come out of the sheds to pull his train during a rainy day, Thomas raced back to Tidmouth sheds and managed to convince a paranoid Henry that the rain would not hurt him, finally helping him get over his fear of the rain. Thomas continued to work in the yard and over time, he became more skilled at shunting. While taking a break in the yard one day, Thomas saw James being pushed by his trucks unable to stop due to his burning brake blocks. Thomas bravely chased after James, abandoning his punishment, and tried to stop him, but unfortunately, James derailed and landed in a field. Thomas rushed back to Knapford and retrieved Judy and Jerome, who helped him derail James. As a reward for his heroic actions, Thomas was rewarded with his own branch line and 2 coaches of his own, Annie and Clarabelle. From that point on, Thomas began proudly working on his branch line. 8. However, he was key to several major events on Sodier, eventually becoming the first tank engine to explore the world. He now visits and works on foreign railways on occasion. Thomas, it's so awesome having you all with us, JD. Me, thanks Thomas. It's so awesome helping you all out. Lincoln, it sure is. I loved watching you guys back when I was little. It was awesome. Thomas, I'm glad we have so many fans. Shocker, it feels like forever since I watched you guys. You really are an inspiration for a lot of good children. Me, I know Herman. Thomas, I heard you guys destroyed an evil villain named Narissa. Me, we sure did. That was one of our most action-packed battles. But it was so intense that it threatened to tear the whole planet apart. Thomas, that's amazing. Nico, it sure was. May, I'll never forget that. That was one of the most intense battles we've ever had. Lizzie, I remember reading about that. That battle was intense. Clay, goosebumps, that was an incredible battle. I remember hearing about that before we were forced to go back to Horrorland. Luke Morris, I know. Elena, that was intense. Will, that was a rough battle. But in the end we all triumphed. Thomas, I'm happy for all of you. Your teamwork is really quintessential for overpowering your strongest enemies. Me, that's right Thomas. It takes the power of teamwork to achieve victory. Divided we are weak, but united we are stronger. Thomas, that's a great saying. Lincoln, it sure is. They arrived at a mine and there they saw a mine trolley come out. It was one of the troublesome trucks. Thomas, not so fast troublemaker. They pulled up. Mine trolley, Thomas the Tin Head. I did expect to see you here. Lincoln, your joyride is over, punk. Mine trolley, Lincoln loud. Lizzie, not just him. They grabbed him and put him on the incarceration cart. Thomas, you have a lot to answer for when we get back. Asterisk asterisk asterisk. Gordon the Big Engine, Lori, Teresa, Arpeggio, Abby Martin, and Haylin. Asterisk asterisk asterisk. Gordon the Big Engine, Lori, Teresa, Arpeggio, Abby Martin, and Haylin were going down the rails. Gordon was built at Doncaster in 1922 as an experimental prototype for Sir Nigel Gresley's A1 Pacific design for the Great Northern Railway. Inevitably there were faults which needed correction, so Gordon was kept hush-hush and, apart from test runs, was never put into regular traffic or given a GNR number. He was used experimentally until all defects had been cured and the first batch of Pacifics had appeared in 1922/23. In 1923 therefore Gordon was no longer needed and was sold to the NWR together with a spare boiler and firebox. During Gordon's early years on the railway, he often looked down on the smaller engines like Edward and Thomas. However, he would soon find he needed help from Edward to be his banker after he got stuck on a hill with a train of trucks. He also needed Edward and Henry to pull his passenger train after he broke his safety valve in front of Henry's tunnel. Gordon often found Thomas very annoying for whistling rudely at him, so he taught him a lesson by bringing him along his express train before he could be uncoupled. Thomas usually fetched the coaches for him. However, after Thomas left the yard when he was given a branch line, Gordon, along with Henry and James, soon found that they had to fetch their own coaches. After the big engines had several mishaps, one of which involved him having to pull his train backwards, Gordon proposed that they all go on strike, where they would only pull their coaches if another engine fetched them. Edward was the only engine left, and since he was a tender engine and that Gordon proposed that tender engines do not shunt, they started to discriminate against Edward until the Fat Controller decided to leave them in the shed until they learned the error of their ways. After Gordon, Henry, and James saw how silly they were, the Fat Controller let them out, reminding them to behave, and bought a tank engine named Percy to help fetch their coaches. Gordon almost had a run-in accident with Percy when he carelessly stood on the main line. After Percy ran away backwards and stopped in a pile of dirt, Gordon helped him out. Gordon was still arrogant and insulted Henry for the way he whistled. However, he ate his own words when his whistle jammed and he went running down the main line whistling continuously. He did not stop until a fitter climbed up and knocked his whistle in place. Gordon is mainly used for passenger duties, pulling the Northwestern Railway's express, the Wild Nor'Wester, but has occasionally pulled goods trains, much to his dislike. He has been known to run into ditches and stop on hills to get out of doing these jobs, as he believes that these are below him. In 1939, Gordon went to Crewe for a rebuild. His conjugated valve gear, which had been giving much trouble, was replaced by a two-cylinder chassis, designed by the Fat Controller. He received a smoother running plate, as the new cylinders couldn't fit under the original. This rebuild effectively made him a hybrid with Steyr valve gear, running plate, and cylinders, while the rest above was Gressley built. Gordon has become famous after his adventures. In 1952, he was forbidden from pulling passenger trains following his incident in the ditch he caused, but after a period of good behavior, by 1953, his punishment ended and he pulled Queen Elizabeth II's royal train. In 1956, he traveled to London, where he was lauded by a large crowd. Gordon did not like the visit, however, as he discovered that London's big station was St. Pancras, which he thought was King's Cross. In 1957, during City of Truro's visit, Gordon heard that the famous engine had reached 100 miles an hour, and believed he could go reach that speed. This resulted in him losing him dome on the viaduct. Later, when Diesel arrived on trial and was having trouble moving some old trucks, he blamed on Duck by making rumors about him giving Gordon a bad nickname, the Galloping Sausage. As a result, Gordon, Henry, and James began to turn against Duck by forbidding him from the shed. However, when the truth came out that Duck had not made the nicknames, they began to feel very silly about jumping to conclusions before knowing the true story. In 1965, Gordon complained about Boko going on the main line, because the diesel only works on Edwards' branch line. He claimed that the Fat Controller would never agree and states that branch lines are vulgar. That night, Gordon's crew mistakenly believed that the passenger with a green hat was the guard waving his green flag. As a result, Gordon left with the majority of the passengers, the luggage, and the guard stranded on the platform. Everyone was surprised, but the surprise quickly gave way to anger. This made Gordon so embarrassed, he brought his train back down to the big station as Edward was already late with his train. But the signalman at the junction was not told about the change. Because of this, Edward was sent to the main line and Gordon was sent down to Edward's branch line. He spent the night at Brendam, and was teased by Bill and Ben of being a lot of old iron that should be scraped or sunked. Boko stopped them, and Gordon gained respect to him. In 1967, Gordon felt devastated about his siblings after hearing that they were all scrapped on the mainland, but happy to hear that his brother Flying Scotsman was preserved, when the Fat Controller brought him to reunite with Gordon. Then, in 1986, Gordon heard about high-speed trains on the other railway, and believed he could go faster than them. However, he had a wheelship and later covered wedding guests and the Fat Controller's top hat with soot. He managed to redeem himself and get the express over his hill after his fire bars collapsed, and got to visit Carlisle when a diesel taking a rail tour failed. In 1995, Gordon had been hauling the express when a flock of crows swooped in front of the train, resulting in one of them knocking the seal out of his front brake pipe. As Gordon could not go far on the other railway due to a lack of water pipes, he would have to change places with a diesel locomotive at Barrow, who would take the Wild Nor'Wester onwards to London. By the early 2000s, however, this wasted too much time and the timetable was considered too slow. Sir Stephen Hatt decided to buy Pip and Emma to run the service, as they are capable of doing a complete round trip every day, which he did so in 2010. Gordon now pulls fast passenger trains, which he prefers as he can do 2 round trips per day instead of 1 and does not need to hurry. Gordon's last train of the day stops at all the stations on the main line. One evening, delays on the other railway resulted in him being late. At Kildane, he encountered a fire and he urged his driver to do something. His driver used a hose to put out the fire with water from Gordon's tender. Following this, the fire brigade recommended him for the Queen's Fire Service Medal, which he is very proud of. Gordon has been, to date, the fastest engine on Sodier, but has sometimes had accidents, sometimes due to him trying to show off. In the 5th series, his brakes were not working and he could not stop, resulting in him crashing through the Kirk Ronan station wall. Also, in the 6th series, he ignored Salty's advice about going slow while pulling trucks, resulting in him speeding down a rickety old branch line and tumbling into a field. Though he has proven to not be too big for his wheels and to be useful instead, like when Spencer first arrived on Sodier, he gave him advice about taking on water before going to Maron station. In result, he ran out of water on Gordon's hill and Gordon had to pull him from there. In the 10th series, he, along with Edward, criticized Rocky when he first arrived on Sodier and called him newfangled nonsense. Afterwards, when he crashed into Edward's pipes, which had fallen off his flatbeds, he derailed. In result, Rocky came and lifted him back onto the rails and cleared the pipes, proving how useful he is. Gordon once tried taking a shortcut in order to beat Stanley to Great Watervan, but accidentally crashed into Ben's logs, but luckily, saved Stanley from crashing into them on the track below. When Gordon was given the task of taking the Lion of Sodier to the Duke and Duchess of Boxford's summer house with Ferdinand, he ignored his advice about going slowly over the Finland, with the result of the statue falling into the muddy marsh. After the statue was cleaned, Gordon let Ferdinand be his front engine and they delivered the statue safely to the summer house. They have since then been good friends. One day, Gordon accidentally broke his buffer beam after colliding with a truck at the diesel works and Den and Dart gave him a yellow and hazard buffer beam, similar to Den's, but Gordon refused to wear it until he later found that he can still be really useful as what Thomas said. One winter he, along with the rest of the steam team, had to find places to sleep, when the turntable at Tidmouth Sheds was frozen, so he decided to sleep there, in the one accessible berth, resulting in him getting stuck in there the next morning and remaining there for the rest of the day. He has since become a more sensible engine. Once, he was waiting at Kelsthorpe Road station while a workman was painting a telephone box on the other platform. But the man accidentally kicked his paint can onto the track next to Gordon, just as Connor raced through the station, splattering red paint all over Gordon. When Henry saw red spots all over Gordon, he assumed the blue engine had chicken pox. Later, as he was filling up with water, he told Philip to get on with his work and keep out of his way. He explained to Philip that he pulls the express and is very fast. As Gordon returned to Knapford with the express, Philip reversed back to the station as Gordon braked hard and told him that he nearly caused an accident. As he was resting in the yard, Philip challenged Gordon to a race and started to race away, but Gordon went back to resting instead of racing him. That night, Gordon was not very happy and decided to show Philip how fast he can go the next day and told him to have another race. In the 20th series, he was not ready to leave the sheds as his firebox had not been cleaned out the night before. As Henry was pulling the express, Gordon arrived into Knapford to fetch his train, but the Fat Controller scolded Gordon for coming in late and told him that he had been assigned to goods trains for the rest of the day. Gordon was grumpy as he arrived at Brendam Docks with his goods train. Salty, Porter, and Cranky greeted him. Gordon was given a train of coal. When he returned to Knapford, he asked the Fat Controller if he could pull the express again, but he was told to go to the Blue Mountain Quarry instead. As he arrived at the quarry, Gordon was still in a bad mood as he collected a train of stone. As he began to leave, the trucks put their brakes on and then released them, causing Gordon to jump the points and hit a buffer stop. Finally fed up with his work, he ordered to be uncoupled so he could go back to the sheds. That night, the Fat Controller scolded him again for not doing all his jobs that day and ordered him to pull the Flying Kipper as punishment or else Henry would pull the express permanently. Henry and Thomas teased him about it not being an easy job, but Gordon was determined to prove them wrong and left the sheds to pull the Flying Kipper. As he returned to the sheds next morning, the Fat Controller praised him for successfully delivering the Kipper on time and told him that he could now go back to being the express engine again, much to Gordon's delight. When the other engines noticed how smelly he was after pulling the Flying Kipper, he quickly went to the washdown whilst the other engines laughed. In the Great Race, Gordon introduced Thomas to his brother, the Flying Scotsman, at Vickerstown, and later teased Thomas for wanting to compete in the Great Railway Show, believing that he is too small to compete. Gordon was selected by the Fat Controller to participate in the Great Race and was temporarily streamlined for the event. However, he refused to undergo the final safety checks, and as a result, the workman forgot to attach his safety valve. Thomas brought it to the mainland and tried to warn Gordon, but he competed in the race without it and his boiler exploded when he refused to heed Thomas and Flying Scotsman's warnings. Gordon had to drop out of the race as a result. After the Great Railway Show was over and all of the foreign engines, except for Ashima, had gone home, Gordon met up with Flying Scotsman, who admitted that his opinion on Sudrian engines has improved significantly since the race. In the 21st series, he and Spencer loved to race to see who is the fastest. However, their boasting about led to Gordon saying that he is an important engine, as he started at Platform 1. Spencer then went to Platform 1 and made Gordon move to Platform 2, where Spencer was supposed to be going to. Then, Thomas and Philip shunted Gordon and Spencer's coaches to them. Unfortunately, the coaches ended up for the wrong engines as the two were on the wrong platforms. This led to a mix-up and the two both set off without realizing that they had a wrong coaches. After they raced along the main line, Gordon stopped at Wellsworth with Spencer's coaches while Spencer thundered down with the express, and he realized that Spencer got the wrong express coaches and chased after him all the way to Callan Castle. This ended up upsetting the passengers because of how they missed their stops, and they did not realize that they had the wrong coaches that they shunted on the platform for the first place. There, Gordon and Spencer took the passengers to the right stations and returned to Knapford and apologized to each other as they watched the fireworks all together. He also teased Philip about his number 68 painted on their side, and after 68 sheep ran onto the track, Philip saved him from the sheep blocking on the main line. Gordon was very upset when Edward moved from Tidmouth to Wellsworth Sheds, even more so when Henry decided to move to Vickerstown Sheds. He was so upset about all the changes happening on the railway that he threw a tantrum in front of Thomas, Annie, Clarabelle, Nia, Paxton, and the Fat Controller, and after failing to convince Edward to come back to Tidmouth once more, the Fat Controller sent him to his shed for his behavior. However, Nia was able to calm Gordon down when she told him that change can be good and that if all her old friends will remain her friends, so will Edward and Henry. Despite bonding with Nia, Gordon was not very pleased to hear of another engine taking over Henry's berth in the sheds, which later turned out to be Rebecca. However, he later became good friends with her, after she retorted the Flying Scotsman's teasing of him about being the little brother. Upon meeting a big blue electric express engine named Gustavo in Brazil, Thomas found that he reminded him of Gordon, especially when he shouted, "Oh, the indignity." Thinking his mindset was like Gordon, Thomas ignored him, until he found out that Gustavo didn't act like Gordon at all. The two engines were soon engaged in a conversation regarding Gordon's streamlining for the Great Railway Show. After Rebecca coated herself in honey and produce, Gordon found himself with an uncontrollable urge to laugh. He kept it suppressed and hidden until Sir Topham Hatt told him it was all right. In the film, Gordon complained to Thomas, who was late, and Thomas retorted that Gordon was being bossy and told him that he had to find Mr. Conductor, who was coming to visit Sodier to look after the Northwestern Railway while Sir Topham Hatt was taking a holiday. He thought Mr. Conductor was not needed until Diesel 10 sped through Thomas and Gordon at Kilabanbai. Later, he, James and Thomas argued about who should have taken Mr. Conductor and retorted that James is a big engine and Thomas is a small blue engine. Gordon, it's such an honor to have you all with us, Laurie. Laurie, thanks Gordon. It's literally so awesome to be here. You're my favorite engine. I literally love you on the show. Gordon, thanks Laurie. I'm so glad I have some fans. Teresa, I heard you were once one of the meta breed. Teresa, that's right. I was once Talon. I looked like a harpy and had deadly sonic scream powers. I got that way because of an experimental mutagenic compound that mutated me. Gordon, I'm sorry that happened to you. I'm glad JD and everyone cured you. Teresa, me too. Hey Lynn, but we're glad we can help out everyone in need. Arpeggio. British accent. That's right lads. Gordon, I heard you all took down the evil Transformer Devil, Unicron. Lori, that was literally one of our most intense battles. They arrived at a railway and they saw Barnstaple railway van. Gordon, hold it right there. Railway van, Gordon the chump. Lori, you shut up or I will rip your wheels off. Halen and Lori formed a powerful tornado and put the railway van on the cart. Gordon, you have a lot to answer for. Asterisk asterisk asterisk. James the Splendid Engine, Ed, Linka, Lynn, Lightning, Jillian Gerard, Jackson Gerard, Sandman, Cornelia, and Clayface. Asterisk asterisk asterisk. James the Splendid Engine, Ed, Linka, Lynn, Jillian and Jackson Gerard, Sandman, Cornelia, and Clayface were riding down the rails. James was designed by George Hughes and built by Horwich Works at some point between 1912 and 1913. He was designed as an experimental variation of the Class 28 locomotives, with a front pony truck installed at the front and 5 feet 6 inches sized driving wheels instead of the class usual 5 feet 1 inch. These were added in an attempt to cure the nosediving the class experienced when traveling at high speed. The experiment did not entirely produce the results hoped for, and after the grouping James was sold to the Northwestern Railway. Shortly after he arrived on the island of Sodier, James was damaged in a crash when his trucks pushed him down the line and his wooden brake blocks caught on fire. After being recovered from the wreck, James was sent to Crovan's Gate Works, where he was repaired, repainted into a new red livery and gained functional brakes. He presumably gained his Fowler tender around this time. When James returned from the works, he became vain and troublesome. While double-heading a passenger train with Edward, he accidentally showered water on the Fat Controller's new top hat, almost forgot to stop at the station, and disturbed an elderly lady with his hiccups. After being threatened by the Fat Controller with a coat of blue paint, James became grumpy and started bumping the coaches around aggressively, though this backfired on him when one of the brake pipes began leaking and needed to be mended with a bootlace and some newspapers. Following this incident, James was shut up in the shed until he could learn his lesson. When he was finally let out by the Fat Controller, James was assigned to pulling a goods train to Kildane. Although he had some trouble when some of the trucks broke away, James managed to keep the train under control and deliver it to the station and was allowed to keep his red paint after the Fat Controller had seen everything. Even though he had proven to be useful, James was still teased by Gordon and Henry, who mocked him for his past mistakes. However, after Gordon got lost and wound up at Tidmouth, James was allowed to take the express in his place. He did so successfully and he and Gordon became firm friends. When Thomas left Tidmouth to run the Farquhar branch line, James, Gordon, and Henry became irritated, as they now had to fetch their own trains. After an incident on the turntable that left him humiliated, James, along with Gordon and Henry, decided to go on strike, refusing to leave the shed and behaving badly when they had to work. The Fat Controller eventually shut them up in the shed and made Thomas and Edward pull their trains, though he allowed them to come out when they were sorry. When Diesel arrived on trial, James gained the nickname Rusty Red Scrap Iron. Believing that Duck was behind the insults, James, along with Gordon and Henry, turned against him. However, when Diesel was exposed and Duck was proven innocent, James and the other engines were sorry and welcomed him back. James later recalled the events of Diesel's visit to Duncan, though he greatly exaggerated certain parts of the tale, making it seem as though he was the one who sent him packing. James continued to treat diesel engines with hostility, long after the other steam engines had already accepted them. Although he liked Boko and Bear, James was openly nasty to other diesels, believing them to be inferior. However, when his injector froze one wintry day and he had to be rescued by the works diesel, James decided to give up his prejudiced views, as the diesel had been friendly to him. In 2011, James was chosen by the Fat Controller to go to the mainland to collect a bust of the Thin Clergyman and deliver it to Tidmouth. James did so, but on the way back the entrance to Henry's tunnel collapsed. Thankfully, James had gone through the tunnel before it collapsed and made it to Tidmouth with the bust. He attended its unveiling alongside the other engines. James arrived on the Northwestern Railway sometime before Thomas's arrival and was originally painted black and wore wooden brake blocks, which were prone to burning up and emitting smoke when stopping. He originally owned Annie and Clarabelle and believed that he would be given his own branch line, although the other engines doubted this. When Thomas came to Sodier, James teased him on several occasions for making mistakes, often joining in with Gordon to make fun of him. However, one day, James ran out of control with a goods train and was unable to stop due to his brake blocks being on fire. Thomas chased after the train and tried to slow it down, but James flew off a bend and crashed in a field, the crash badly damaging him. Thomas rushed back to Knapford and retrieved Jerome and Judy, who helped to clear away the wreckage and placed James back on the rails. James was sent to the steam works to be mended, where he received his new red livery. Upon returning from the steam works, James found out that Annie and Clarabelle now belonged to Thomas, who had been given the responsibility of running the Farquhar branch line. In the film, Thomas met James at Tidmouth Sheds until Diesel 10 first arrived and told them his plans to destroy the lost engine named Lady. James and Thomas rebel against Diesel 10. Later on, Thomas, James and Gordon argue about who should have collected Mr. Conductor. After Mr. Conductor is helping to make James' itch go away, James is sad, so Mr. Conductor happily says his red paint is bright and cheerful just like the gold dust and sends him off to work. Sometime afterwards, James appears at the smelter's yard when Diesel 10 arrived with Junior. Junior lands onto James' cab and the two almost got thrown into the smelting pit by Diesel 10. Luckily, Junior used his gold dust to teleport them to a spot near the magic buffers, where Mr. Conductor was waiting. James departs and thanks Junior for his help. Astro Train arrived and he was in his train mode. James sees Astro Train's train form, so that's why they call you Astro Train. I get it now. Astro Train, in his train mode. I can't believe that those stupid trucks can cause so much trouble. James, you have no idea. Lightning is gonna strike those trucks into prison. Shabby LAM. Lynn, we're not here to fight lightning. Ed, that is correct. Jillian Gerard, those trucks will know how prison feels by the time we're done with them. Jackson Gerard, you got that right. Cornelia, never mess with the good production of good trains. James, I'm glad you think so, Cornelia. Clayface, I agree. Sandman, the troublesome trucks will love hard labor. Linka, yep. They saw in the van. James, hey you bad bucket. Navan, well if it isn't stupid and ugly James. Astro Train, the only ugly one is you. Astro Train formed a crane and put the Navan on the incarceration cart. James, you have a lot to answer for. Asterisk asterisk asterisk. Ben and Bill, Lola and Lana, Poison Ivy, Julie Martin, Killer Frost, Bloom, Michael Monroe, Francis, Lee, and Tyranny. Asterisk asterisk asterisk. Ben and Bill were both rolling down the tracks with Lana and Lola, Poison Ivy, Julie Martin, Killer Frost, Bloom, Michael Monroe, Francis, Lee, and Tyranny. One day, Bill and Ben returned from shunting some trucks to find that some other trucks they had shunted earlier were missing. Their drivers, after examining a puddle of oil on the ground, concluded a diesel was responsible. After the twins argued over who brought the dice assel into the yard, the drivers suggested they go looking for the diesel. The twins were horrified at the possibility that the dice assel might magic them away like he did with the trucks, but their drivers quickly persuaded them otherwise, and so they set off. At last, the twins found the dice assel. While Ben ran behind, Bill confronted the dice assel over the theft. The dice assel claimed the trucks were his and ordered Bill to go away. Bill pretended to be frightened and slunk away, remarking, "You'll be sorry." With that, Ben ran up and accused the dice assel of being a truck stealer, before running back so Bill could run up again. This continued until the dice assel, under the impression that there was only one very swift and annoying saddle tank, became so giddy that his eyes nearly popped out, just as the twins puffed up beside him. The dice assel, initially confused, laughed at his ignorance. When Edward arrived moments later, inquiring as to why Bill and Ben were not shunting, the twins angrily claimed that the dice assel had sneaked into their yard and stolen their trucks. Edward soon realized what was going on and explained the situation. The twins, embarrassed, apologized to the dice assel, who asked to be called Boko, and then left to shunt some more trucks, leaving Edward and Boko to laugh about the incident. A few days later, after Boko took the express in James' absence, Edward recounted what Gordon had said about branch lines to the twins. The next morning, after Gordon ended up at Brehm after a series of events involving poor preparations and a large floppy green hat, the twins sneaked up beside him and loudly recounted what Gordon had said about branch lines. Concluding that the engine beside them could not be Gordon, the two declared he was nothing more than a pile of old scrap iron, and began to contemplate what they should do. Bill was all for sending Gordon to be scrapped, while Ben favored the more humane option of dumping him in the sea, all the while ignoring Gordon's protests, until at last, Boko arrived. Gordon begged him to save him, and so Boko threatened the twins to leave with the trucks he had brought. The twins quickly left, leaving Gordon with Boko. Boko wisely neglected to tell Gordon the twins were joking. Some time later, a group of enthusiasts came to visit the railways of Sodier. When Edward brought them to Brehm, the twins took them to the China clay workings in a brake van special. In 1988, Thomas was sent to work on Edward's branch line while repairs were carried out on a bridge on Thomas's branch line. The twins were quick to tease him about his color, but Edward was savvy enough to send the twins away before an argument broke out. After Thomas returned to the yard, covered in dairy from a collision with a farm lorry, the two teased him even more about his new livery. This continued until Edward announced a party of enthusiasts were coming, and threatened that he would not bring them to see the twins. The twins, excited, decided instead to worry about their own paint, for example, how clean it was, although one day, when the drivers remarked that the enthusiasts would not eat their dinner off them, Bill quipped that they might if we were Thomas. When at last, the enthusiasts did arrive, a photographer with an instant camera began harassing Ben by continuously taking pictures of him, even after the remainder of the crowd went to watch Bill tug a boat into deeper waters. At last, the photographer prepared to take one final picture, just as Bill's driver arrived to ask for assistance. Ben's driver turned on the steam just as the photographer took the picture. Disgusted with the poor quality of the shot, he abandoned it on the floor and left. The picture was later discovered by Bill's driver after the two rescued the boat. The repairs to the bridge took a long time, and Thomas was still at Brehm when the rainy season came. At the drain, the hollow in the land where rainwater collected, the water even began to come near the rails, although no one took much notice. One particularly wet day, as Ben returned from the workings, the wind whipped the rainwater into a wave which swamped him, dousing his fire. His firemen went for assistance, and brought Thomas to help. While Thomas dragged Ben out, Bill took away the trucks. When at last the water subsided 4 days later and Bill returned to Brehm, the two made a pact to never tease Thomas again. Bill and Ben made their first appearance listening to Percy recount the time he got caught in a flood helping Thomas, before being shooed off by Henry, as they were in a shed specifically for the Fat Controller's engines. One day, Bill and Ben were sent to work in the yard. They got to use the turntable as a reward for their hard work. But Bill and Ben were accidentally sent down the same track and they ended up buffer to buffer. They each blamed each other for the incident and refused to speak to one another. At last, Edward and Boko lost patience and the Fat Controller heard about the incident. He gave the twins a chance to work together, and sure enough, the plan worked. The twins started to speak to each other again. Bill and Ben sometimes found it dull up at the clay works and wanted something exciting to happen. They got their wish when a rock slide devastated the quarry. Luckily, Bill and Ben had taken all of the workmen and the foreman out of the quarry before the rock slide. The Fat Controller was so pleased that he called them heroes. Later, Boko could not handle the twins as much as he used to, so Sir Topham Hatt had to bring in another diesel, Derek. Bill and Ben had heard from Percy that Derek had a toothache, but they soon found out that Derek really had teething troubles. The twins and Derek had to pull a train the next day, and Derek soon overheated. Together, the twins got the train to their destination. That night, Boko and Duck talked about Derek all night long. When Salty was sent to work with the twins and Mavis with an important job, he impressed the twins with his skills for handling the trucks. When Salty handled the trucks with songs and tales of the sea, Bill and Ben became jealous. They became even crosser when Salty told them stories. Luckily for them, Salty was transferred to Brendam docks. Bill and Ben met Salty again when they themselves went to the docks and started teasing Cranky. This time, they encouraged Salty to tell them his stories, knowing that Cranky couldn't stand them. The twins spent the entire night being engrossed in and fascinated by Salty's many tales, and when they left the following morning, Cranky was pleased. Afterwards, Ben had to get new buffers, so he was sent to the works. Bill became jealous and his mind drifted away from his work. After some trucks teased him, Bill crashed into a ditch. Ben arrived to rescue Bill and Bill was taken to the works to be mended. Some time later, Fergus was sent to help the twins at the quarry but got tired of his do-it-right attitude. Bill and Ben collected a rock crusher from the docks and caused a rock slide. Fergus pushed them out of the way, but the twins returned the favor when they helped him out of the rocks. In the 17th series, they teased Percy after he had an accident with a mailbag, unaware the pumpkins on their train were falling onto the tracks, which caused more problems for Percy. After Sir Topham Hatt ordered one twin to act as a back engine, Bill reluctantly went to push from behind. Ben ended up derailing near an embankment, and Percy, although he was nervous because he had lost his new lucky charm, helped Bill pull Ben back onto the tracks. After racing Connor several times, by racing, one would start the race and the other twin would be waiting at the finish, Sir Topham Hatt figured out their tricks. So people would not confuse the two or think they were the same engine, Bill was repainted blue. To continue the tricks, Ben tricked Kevin into giving him a blue coat of paint too. Since then they were repainted to their yellow schemes. They also teased Harvey about going fishing with his hook. Thomas was sent to work with the twins at the clay pits while a bridge on his branch line was being repaired. They ran away from him, and after he caught up, they teased him about being slow. They showed him to a line of trucks, which he was coupled up to. Thomas began pulling them, but did not realize that Timothy was on the other end, jerking the little oil-burning engine backwards. Later that day, there was a storm at the pits, and the rain made the cliffs unstable. Thomas was near some cliffs, and saw a set of mysterious footprints. However, the area was still unstable and he was unable to investigate. Bill and Ben pushed Thomas to safety just before the three were hit by a landslide. The next morning, the twins were congratulated by the Fat Controller. Later in the week, Thomas asked if they were playing a trick on him by scaring him with fake footprints. However, Bill and Ben thought that their rescuing him was a trick and so they puffed away, offended. The next morning at dawn, when Percy went to the clay pits to prove his bravery to James, Bill accused Ben of making puffing noises in his sleep, and when Thomas came looking for Percy, the twins assumed that they could literally hear what Timothy was dreaming. When they went to work the day, they were almost hit by a landslide, and after Marion found a fossil, Bill and Ben were both very intrigued by the concept of fossils. In the 18th series, Bill and Ben played Guess What's in My Shovel with Marion. They also teased Timothy for being an oil-burning engine, but when the clay pits ran out of coal, Timothy went to pick up some more. They apologized for their teasing. However, they later sent Timothy on what the Fat Controller referred to as a fool's errand to search for a rainbow-colored truck. Timothy brought back a green truck with several colors of paint on it full of dockyard waste. Bill and Ben were sent to take it to Whiff's waste dump as a punishment, as well as being on waste duty. They also teased Emily and Samson. In the 19th series, the twins became convinced that Timothy was no help at all. So when they found out that the Fat Controller was looking for an engine to help at Brendam docks, they volunteered Timothy. Unfortunately, the twins were too busy messing around to work on their own properly. Luckily, once Timothy was no longer required at the docks, he came back to the clay pits to help them clear up the mess. In Sodier's Legend of the Lost Treasure, they teased Henry when he saw a ghostly railboat on the rails the previous night, which was really skiff. In the 22nd series, Harvey came to help them out when they had an accident. Rebecca was there to see Harvey arrive to help them, and noted how cool he looks with his crane. Later on Valentine's Day, Bill, Ben, and Diesel teased Thomas and Rosie that they were a lovely couple, while Thomas and Rosie did not want to be embarrassed by the teasing. Bill and Ben made up a game called Hunt the Truck and hit a truck for Nia along with Edward's truck full of Christmas decorations and presents for Sir Robert Norramby's Christmas party. Edward knew what the twins were up to and took the truck from where they hid it. As a way to give them a taste of their own medicine, he pretended to be worried about losing the truck and how the party will be ruined, prompting the twins to go on a search for it. They eventually gave up and decided to apologize to everyone for what they did, only to run into Edward at the party and realize that he had taken the truck they hid and taught them a lesson on how it felt to have trucks hidden from them. Ben, I love how you guys did all kinds of fun adventures. Lana, we get that a lot, Ben. Bill, my favorite was when you put that evil teacher Ms. Trunchbull in prison forever. Lola, that was our friend Gabrielle that did that. Tyranny, I heard about that. Ms. Trunchbull ruled over that whole school with fear and she wanted nothing more than to kill all those children. Bloom, she gives all teachers and principals everywhere a really bad name. Poison Ivy, you got that right, Bloom. Killer Frost, she was pure evil. Julie Martin, I would make a teacher like that suffer terribly for it. Francis, me too. Lee, same here. Ben, you guys are a force of good. They found a field with cattle and they saw a cattle truck loading up some cattle. Bill, a cattle truck. Lana, let's get it. They pulled up. Bill, hey you troublemaker. Ben, stop that. Cattle van, well if it isn't the freakish twins. Lana, you be quiet. Lola, and save your banter for your time in jail. Lana and Lola loaded them up. Ben, you have to answer for your crimes. Bill, let's go. Asterisk asterisk asterisk. Henry the Green Engine, Lisa, Stewie, Tnay, Robbie Schwartz, and Bowser Jr. Asterisk asterisk asterisk. Henry the Green Engine, Lisa, Stewie, Tnay, Robbie Schwartz and Bowser Jr. were going down the rail. Henry's precise origins are uncertain. The story goes that he was built from drawings stolen from Sir Nigel Gressley at Doncaster about 1919 by an anonymous locomotive builder who held a grudge against him and desired to steal a march on him. His spy, however, blundered and took the wrong drawings. They were for an experimental engine, but were supposed to be for the new Pacific locomotives Gressley was designing at the time. The thief realized his mistake too late and Henry was built, with many resulting flaws and a superficial likeness to Gressley's Pacifics. The thief was delighted to unload his white elephant onto the first desperate customer who came along, the Fat Controller. He had intended to buy a Robinson Atlantic of the Great Central Railway, but was tricked into purchasing Henry in 1922 instead and had no choice but to keep him due to the railway being desperate for locomotives. Henry was vain and stopped in the Ballyhoo Tunnel and refused to come out, citing that his paintwork would be spoiled by the rain. After several attempts to move him failed, he was bricked up in the tunnel until Gordon broke down while pulling the express. As Edward was unable to move the train himself, the Fat Controller offered to let Henry out of the tunnel to help. Henry eagerly accepted. Henry performed very well and the Fat Controller promised him a new coat of paint, since Henry's existing paintwork had been spoiled more by his stay in the tunnel than it would have been by the rain. Henry asked to be painted blue like Edward. However, many people confused him with Gordon, to the bigger engine's annoyance. The matter was worsened after a trip to the works when Henry was given spares of Gordon's buffers. Sometime before 1935, Henry, when again offered new paint, chose green, and so ended the Gordon/Henry confusion. Unfortunately, Henry was to suffer humiliation when he was hosed with water by an elephant he frightened. After Gordon and James had suffered humiliations of their own, and all three had become thoroughly fed up having to do their own shunting and fetch their own coaches, the big engines went on strike. The Fat Controller naturally disapproved of this nonsense and locked them up in the shed for several days, leaving them miserable. However, they were let out again after promising to work hard. The poor engine in his system, which was already finicky at best due to design flaws, never really recovered from his stay in the tunnel. Henry developed steaming problems, which he complained about constantly, though he found little sympathy, especially when it caused him to run late. A period came when the mainline engines were supplied with a poor delivery of coal, and Henry had a very difficult time of it indeed. He had strength to pull trains only sporadically, in spite of numerous parts replacements. At last, the Fat Controller looked into it personally and asked for the opinion of Henry's fireman, who told him about the poor coal and Henry's firebox being too small to burn it efficiently. The fireman also suggested purchasing the high-grade Welsh coal used on the Great Western Railway. Sir Topham had agreed to purchasing some in order to give Henry a fair chance. When the Welsh coal came, Henry's performance vastly improved, such that he was comparable to Gordon. He continued to use the coal until he had a collision with a goods train at Kildane while pulling the Flying Kipper and was sent to Crewe to be rebuilt in 1935. Henry was rebuilt into a Stanier 5MT. Sir Topham had connections with Sir William Stanier, so this is likely the reason he managed to get Henry rebuilt so quickly. After returning, Henry was added to the rotation for the Express and pulled it so well that he made Gordon jealous. Gordon tried to get even by rudely criticizing Henry for whistling loudly at stations, but he had to eat his words later that day after his own whistle valve jammed open. Some time later, Henry was taking a slow train. As he passed under a bridge, three boys he had assumed to be rail fans dropped stones onto him and his coaches. He paid them out on his return journey by sneezing ashes that collected in his smoke box at them. When Queen Elizabeth II was due to visit Sodier in 1953, Henry, justifiably, assumed that he was the Fat Controller's choice to pull the royal train. But the day before, while he was idling at the station, his smoke blinded a painter, who fell along with his paint pot onto Henry. The paint splashed over Henry's boiler, and as painting over it would take too long, Gordon was given the job instead. When Duck arrived in 1955 to take over Percy's duties as station pilot, Henry, along with Gordon and James, teased him and tried to give him orders, as they had been doing to Percy. With Percy's help, Duck blocked the big engines from entering the shed. The Fat Controller arrived and told the two tank engines off for causing a disturbance. Henry and the others laughed, until the Fat Controller shouted for silence and told them that they had been worse, as they had made the disturbance. He told them that Duck was right. He, Sir Topham is in charge and he gives the orders. Henry respected Duck more after that. Sometime after this period, Henry gained a Fowler tender for unknown reasons. By this time, Henry once acted rudely with the engines at Barrow-in-Furness while in the middle of a conversation with Percy, calling him and them silly things and challenging Percy's statement that he did not fear water. Percy retaliated by reminding Henry about his stay in the tunnel, but Percy was shown wrong when he accidentally ended up smokebox first in the sea at Knapford Harbour. When Percy was to be sent at the works the next day, Henry ridiculed Percy, telling him that he would be braver the next time he plunged into the sea, but Percy was quite determined that there would not be a next time. Henry would then later accompany the engines to England. Henry's good opinion of Duck would be briefly spoiled in 1957. He and the other mainline engines were growing very tired of Duck's incessant talk about the Great Western Railway following City of Truro's visit. A diesel sent to the island on trial quickly developed a grudge against Duck and spread nasty stories about the mainline engines to the trucks, stories he falsely claimed that Duck had told him. Furious at being called old square wheels, Henry joined Gordon and James in barring Duck from the shed just like what Duck and Percy had done previously. He felt sorry a few days later when he became the next target of Diesel's slander, and when Duck returned after preventing an accident, Henry cheered for him loudly. When Gordon started feeling depressed in 1967, Henry, who thought Gordon was just moaning and groaning, teased him and told him he should get a washout and would feel much better. When Gordon's brother Flying Scotsman visited Sodier, Henry was jealous of the visitor's second tender. Duck and Donald explained, and while Henry took the point, he still was vain enough to want an additional tender. Deciding to bring Henry down to earth, Duck told the big engine that he had in his possession not 1, but 6 spare tenders, which, as a tank engine, he had no need of. Henry accepted, and all the engines waited to see him go past. But instead of a splendid sight, the tenders were old, rusted and full of boiler sludge. Gordon mocked him with a comment about washouts. Henry was so frustrated that the day after 7101 and 199 arrived on trial, he became so hot that his regulator fused wide open and his driver had to use the reverser to control him. On his return journey, no train, he stopped at a signal box next to 199, who had a train of fuel tankers. The signalman told them that 199, who he nicknamed Spamkin, had failed and that he needed to be moved out of the way to clear the line for the limited. Henry pulled the train clear, but shortly afterwards, 7101's ejector failed and the limited ground to a halt. Henry then volunteered to help move both trains. Luckily, all he had to do for 7101 was keep the vacuum brakes off, but it was still hard work. The cavalcade made it to a station where Flying Scotsman waited to take the coaches and Donald to take the goods. Henry brought 7101 to the works afterwards and cheered for the arrival of Oliver several days later. Later, when Gordon needed new tubes, Henry pulled the Express, but soon fell ill as well. This left the job of the Express to Thomas, Percy, and Duck. A while later, Henry had to pull an extra long flying kipper and Duck had to help him up Gordon's hill, but due to a tail lamp falling off the rear van, Duck accidentally crashed into the train. During the subject of paint colors, Henry commented on how he hated to be red and look like a fire engine. The next day, he was rough with his coaches, and resulted in breaking the drawbar between him and his tender. Because of his separate source of water, his fireman was forced to throw out the fire, which set the sleepers alight. After the fire brigade put out the flames, Henry never made rude comments on fire engines again. In 1985, Henry complained to Thomas the time that the viaduct had gone under repairs, when Thomas became impatient with his connection between the main line engines and his branch line. Later, when bringing passengers for Thomas, the tank engine ran away. In 1986, when Gordon accidentally blew ashes when his smoke box was clogged, Henry suggested that Gordon should have a good sneeze, but Gordon reminded Henry that the Fat Controller did not like Henry's sneeze. He also pulled the Express when Gordon slipped on the icy rails and befriended Pip and Emma. When Thomas had been invited to the Great Railway Show, he was angry that he was not chosen and later teased Percy that Thomas was old enough to become a museum piece. In 1992, during the time when the railway began using a new type of coal, Henry began having problems with it, resulting in his smokebox door to be pasted with damp shredded newspaper when hot ashes damaged it. He was to head to Crovan's Gate with James on the Express, but after crossing the viaduct, one of the steel rims on his driving wheel breaks off and shatters a window on one of the coaches. He is taken off and manages to get to the works. After his repairs, he is given an undercoat of red paint, but before the green is applied he is called out to pull the Express. Despite his looks, he manages to pull the train, even getting up Gordon's Hill on his own, and returns home with his finished coat of green. He later fretted over the Golden Jubilee despite Duck, Daisy, James, and Donald trying to cheer him up. In the TV series, Henry loved visiting the forest. Because of how much he loves it, he helped to replant trees after it was destroyed by a storm. He also has had to go back to the works on several occasions, such as when his tubes were leaking and after he had an accident with some trucks. But the reason most often given for Henry's poor state is that he needed special coal again, even though this was corrected in the first series. This error began with the 10th series episode Toby's Afternoon Off and has been fixed as of King of the Railway, as Toby stated that the fact that Henry needed special coal was fixed years ago. The last time Henry was stated to need special coal was in the 15th series. During one winter, he was tasked with working with Spencer to deliver trucks to Vicarstown. But Spencer teased him by making him think there was an abominable snowman on Sodier. After they had delivered their trucks, they both saw a strange white figure stumbling around on the tracks in front of them. Thinking it was the abominable snowman, Spencer tried to run away, but his valves burst, so Henry stood his ground and tried to make the snowman go away. Luckily, it was only the Fat Controller who ended up running into trouble in the heavy snow. One night, he saw Sailor John and Skiff rolling along the line and got a big fright, thinking Skiff was a ghost ship. Some of the engines teased him about it, even though he insisted the boat was real. In the 20th series, Henry had to pull the express for Gordon while he was having his firebox cleaned in the morning. He was initially hesitant but enjoyed himself, especially after the passengers stated he was much friendlier than Gordon. Later, Henry was having a repaint at the steamworks when Kevin gave him the wrong paint. Henry puffed into the night, his new paintwork glowing in the dark, causing his friends to think they had seen a ghost train. The Fat Controller realized that Henry had the wrong paint and told him to return to the steamworks for some proper green paint, while praising Henry for being the only engine working as all the others were too scared to come out of the shed. Henry would later go to the mainland and be a part of the Great Railway Show, competing in the strongest engine race. After the race, he met up with the other engines and informed them that he came in 5th. Philip congratulated him, only for Henry to reveal that there were only 5 engines. In Journey Beyond Sodier, Henry was due to go back to the mainland with a goods train. However, a faulty signal caused him to crash into the back of Hero's train. After being rescued by the breakdown train, the Fat Controller arranged James to take his train while Henry is being repaired. However, Thomas ended up taking the train before James could, and James only went when Thomas did not return. At the end of the film, Henry was fully repaired and returned to the sheds while the others finished singing "The Most Important Thing Is Being Friends," to which he asked, "What did I miss?" Sometime after Tidmouth Sheds was mended from James' accident and after Nia came to Sodier, Henry was relocated to Vicarstown Sheds with Rosie per his request. In the film, Henry had suffered from boiler trouble due to deposits left by fumes from Diesel 10. This time, his sickness was cured by Sodier coal. Henry was one of the few engines who knew the legend about Lady was true, as for he was the first to acknowledge the fact that Diesel 10 was looking for her. Later, Thomas found Henry with a boiler ache and offered to collect trucks of Sodier coal to make Henry feel better. "Henry, you guys have done a lot of good deeds over the last 3 years." Lisa, "Indeed we have, Henry. Our achievements have been made known all over the world." Stewie, "Indeed they have." Tne, British accent, "They have." Henry, "I heard that JD gave his heart to Sandman's daughter who was dying." Lisa, "Affirmative. She was suffering from a heart defect called tetralogy of Fallot, an extremely rare heart defect that causes a lot of cardiac and vascular problems. It was really life-threatening and she needed a heart transplant." Henry, "Wow. That's a big deal." Bowser Jr., "It sure is." Robbie Schwartz, "But JD did a really selfless deed." Henry, "Yet." They arrived at a dairy plant and found a milk tanker troublesome truck. Henry, "Not so fast you Claude." Milk tanker, "Well if it isn't Greena Henry." Henry, "Save your banter for prison time." Lisa lifted up the milk tanker and put him on the cart. Asterisk asterisk asterisk. Harvey the Crane Train, Lily, Billy Deep, Rubber Band Man, Sheena Deep, Inc., and Layla. Asterisk asterisk asterisk. Harvey the Crane Train, Lily, Billy Deep, Rubber Band Man, Sheena Deep, Inc. and Layla were going down the rails. When Harvey first came to the island, the engine said he looked different in all of them except Thomas did not trust him. but when he saved Percy after an accident with some troublesome trucks at Bulgy's Bridge, they realized that Harvey's difference was what made him special. Since then, he has proved very useful, using his crane arm for maintenance, building, and clearing up. He mainly works at Brehm and the shunting yards, but his favorite place to be is at the water works, where he is said to live. Since his addition to the railway, Harvey has helped after many accidents, but he could not do it alone, so Rocky was brought to help. Bill and Ben made fun of Harvey for being both a crane and an engine. However, Porter helped Harvey see to the positives of being a crane engine. The dock manager asked Harvey to deliver flatbeds of scrap metal to Vickerstown since Edward had been delayed, but because he wasn't paying attention when he was going down Gordon's Hill, his flatbeds derailed and made a terrible mess. Fortunately for Harvey, he was able to use his crane to clear it up and was able to deliver the cargo. He also helped Thomas back onto the rails after an accident. Harvey teamed up with Sampson with collecting trackside scrap for the scrapyards while Scruff was being repaired and building the Earl's new dinosaur park. Diesel tried to make mischief between him and Daisy by saying that the other was boasting about being unique. However, this led to the two becoming good friends. Also, when a branch got stuck in his gears, Harvey tried to fix the problem himself, only to make himself derail in a tunnel. After he was repaired, he spun his crane fast enough to throw a crate all the way to a dock worker. He later did the same thing again after Rebecca told him how cool he looks with his crane while helping Bill and Ben clear up the accident. Harvey, I love your adventures, guys. My favorite was when you were on Total Drama All-Stars 2. Lily, that was an awesome adventure. Harvey, I also heard you guys defeated the evil spirit of Jack the Ripper. Lily, we sure did. That was one of our most awesome adventures. Billy Deep, that was so cool. I heard he was dead for 100 years. Sheena Deep, he was. And I heard a dark orb brought him back. Lily, that's right, Sheena. Rubber Band Man, that was a terrifying adventure. But it was really cool. Ink, it sure was. Layla, I'm glad we now have finally seen the last of Jack the Ripper. Harvey, wasn't he like one of the most notorious serial killers in all of London? Lily, he sure was. He terrorized all of Victorian London back at the end of the 19th century. We didn't know who he was until 21st century forensic technology identified. Layla, that is what really amazes me. Harvey, it amazes me too. They saw in a 20-ton brake van. Harvey, hold it right there. In a 20-ton brake van. Harvey? What are you doing here? Harvey, we're arresting you. Lily, that's right. They operated his crane and lifted him up and put him on the cart. Asterisk asterisk asterisk. Donald and Douglas, Laney, Molly Malloy, Flora, Venom, and Rhino. Asterisk asterisk asterisk. Donald and Douglas, the Scottish twins, Laney, Molly Malloy, Flora, Venom, and Rhino were going down the rails. Donald and Douglas were designed by John F. McIntosh and built by the St. Rollox Works for the Caledonian Railway in 1909. Upon nationalisation, they became part of the Scottish region of British Railways, where they were renumbered 57,646 and 57,647. In 1959, Sir Topham Hatt needed a goods engine and by his request, BR decided to transfer 57,646, Donald, to Sodier. To Sir Topham Hatt's surprise though, two engines arrived. Donald's twin Douglas, 57,647, could not stand to be separated from his brother and was smart enough to realize he would eventually be scrapped if he stayed in Scotland. Unfortunately for Sir Topham Hatt and any other worker, neither engine could be told apart. Both claimed to have forgotten their numbers and indeed their number plates had slyly slipped off during the journey from Scotland. This caused the Fat Controller to keep both until he could determine which engine was freeloading on his hospitality. It was later revealed that this piece of skullduggery had been planned not only by the two engines, but also by their drivers and firemen, who were related as well. The Fat Controller was unaware of Douglas' motive and threatened the two that whichever engine he found out to be the truant would be sent home. Both engines resolved to give outstanding service so that Hat would want to keep both of them. This plan quickly went to pieces, however, after Douglas accidentally shunted Thomas's special coach, full of passengers, into a siding at Tidmouth, causing a great deal of fury for the passengers. Things were more complicated when Donald crashed into a signal box at Knapford and Douglas accidentally destroyed the spiteful brake van, who had caused trouble for him earlier. Despite all this grief, the twins' professionalism, competency, strong work ethic and personable natures had begun to win them support, particularly when they demonstrated an aptitude for snowplow work that they had learned in Scotland. After rescuing Henry from just such a snowy ordeal, the other engines came over to Donald and Douglas' side, which ultimately led to the engines of Sodier taking industrial action. After a suggestion by Edward and being pushed into it by Gordon, Percy was presented to the Fat Controller as a deputation, arguing the twins' case on their behalf and pleading that, if sent away, they would be scrapped. Hat's reaction to this was mixed, though he did not approve or appreciate them trying to interfere with his decision-making. He understood the Engine's feelings upon the matters of saving steam engines and scrapping in general. In the end, Percy's statement and the twins' excellent performance was enough for Hat to take pity on the twins and keep both. He demonstrated this intent with an offer of a fresh coat of paint for both engines, as well as giving them both nameplates to avoid any more confusion. By their request they were painted NWR blue, in honor of their Caledonian heritage. In 1967, Douglas helped save Oliver, Isabel, and Toad from the prospect of scrap. The Fat Controller soon found out and arranged for the three to be repaired and painted in Great Western colors. Toad asked to be Douglas' brake van as a show of gratitude. Since then, the twins have, by all accounts, transformed goods traffic on the main line. Such is their versatility that they regularly see service on the Little Western and Edwards branch line, as well as duties as station pilots at Tidmouth. A turntable has been provided for them at Allsburg, although briefly decommissioned after Oliver was pushed into it by some trucks. After Donald teased Duck about his quacking, Duck's crew got a humorous payback by slipping a small duckling into Donald's tender. When discovered, the duckling became friends with Donald and his crew and eventually settled down at Hall Traw, where a small pond was nearby. She was named Dilly by the station master, but she is known to everyone else as Donald's duck. Such a demanding workload has begun to tax them, however, and in 1993 the Fat Controller borrowed a Navy saddle tank named Wilbert from the Dean Forest Railway to deputize for them on the Allsburg branch, with the intention of obtaining another engine of Wilbert's class to permanently fill that role. Donald and Douglas work together practically all the time, but they sometimes have a falling out. This was proven when the two crashed into Trevor's hay cart. Donald accused Douglas of pushing him into the cart while Douglas accused Donald of pulling him. The twins refused to speak to each other. When Duck needed help at the Sodier Iron Works, Donald took the opportunity to get away from Douglas. While Douglas missed his twin and was ready to make up, Donald began to experience lapses in competence and demanded an apology. Eventually, Donald was not looking where he was going and crashed through some buffers into a ditch. As soon as Douglas heard from Duck that Donald was in trouble, he immediately rushed over to help his twin and the two engines made up. Later, Callan Castle was to be reopened by Lord Callan, so Donald and Douglas took some equipment up to the castle. The two argued whether or not the monster inside the lake existed or not. Unfortunately for the twins, a landslide occurs and the two became stranded. The Fat Controller promised help, but soon night came. The twins saw a shape moving towards them on the causeway. Donald and Douglas were petrified until they realized it was only Harvey who had come to help. Soon, the twins got their equipment to the castle on time and Lord Callan called them really useful engines. In the 11th series, some points were jammed and Gordon was sent to pick up the engineer to mend them, but instead picked up the carpenter. Gordon reversed to Abbey hoping to collect the engineer, but Douglas was in the way. Gordon decided that Douglas should go to Wellsworth and Donald to go to Maron to collect the engineer and Donald bring him to Douglas and Douglas bring him back to Gordon. The plan was carried out and the points were fixed. Gordon thanked the twins for helping him. Afterwards, Harvey was sent to help the twins after a tree had been knocked down. Thomas, however, misunderstood the situation and accidentally sent Harvey the wrong way. Thomas was proud of himself for being so helpful until he saw that Donald and Douglas were stuck and needed Harvey's help. He found Harvey and gave him the correct directions needed to help the twins. Thanks to Thomas and Harvey, the line was cleared and the twins were on their way. The twins later helped with the construction of the Harwick branch line, delivering most of the heavy construction materials. When Douglas went over the unstable track bed that hides the tunnel into H.A.Y's cavern, it began to crack and the workmen only just stopped Donald from going over it. The twins witnessed Rocky lifting Captain H.A.Y's pirate ship out of the cavern and helped deliver it to Allsburg Harbor. They later attended the branch line's opening ceremony. Once, they were to clear snow from the tracks during winter, but they kept arguing over which tracks to clear next. Douglas was accidentally separated from his tender and left behind by Donald, who eventually found him in a siding with some help from Toby. Donald and Douglas were among the engines who asked the Fat Controller to take them to the Great Railway Show, but they were not chosen. Another snowy day, they had to take a large shipment of pipes to Vickerstown and Emily came along to help. During the journey, Douglas told Emily about some of Donald's accidents and she began laughing, which Donald could hear echoing through the pipes. Irritated, Donald stopped the train and got Douglas to take his place at the front. As they continued, Donald began telling Emily about Douglas' accidents, until Douglas stopped the train on Gordon's Hill and demanded that he and his brother swap back. With both twins uncoupled and busy squabbling and bumping each other, Emily was left holding the train on her own. They did not notice till too late that Emily and the train were slipping back down the hill. To make matters worse, a lump of coal shaken out of Donald's tender by a bump from Douglas had formed a giant snowball, which knocked Emily off the rails. Donald and Douglas instantly began arguing whose fault the accident was, until Emily cut in and scolded them both for their behavior. After Harvey had cleared away the mess, both twins took the rear of the train while Emily took the front and they reached Vickerstown without any further trouble. Donald and Douglas were later seen at Knapford Station with Philip, Diesel, Emily, Gordon, Duck, Henry, James, Edward, Percy, Daisy, Oliver, Mr. Percival, and Toby to welcome Thomas and his newest friend Nia to Sodier following the pair's adventure around the world. Donald, Scottish accent, you lads and lassies have been all over the place. Venom, we sure have. Rhino, we've been on many adventures. Molly Malloy, we sure have. Laney, it's been an amazing series of adventures that did a lot of good and brought a lot of criminals to justice. Douglas, Scottish accent, aye. You all have done so much, we laddies. Flora, that's right. Donald, I heard you endured the trouble of Slappy. Molly Malloy, yes we did. It was horrifying. Douglas, I'm sorry that happened to you, lass. I heard legends of how evil Slappy was. Molly Malloy, I know. Me and several others dealt with him. Myself, my best friend Brittany, Nico, and many more. Donald, that's terrible, lass. Let's focus now. Laney, you got it. They went down the track and we saw an LMS banana truck. Donald, hold it right there. LMS banana truck, well if it isn't the Scottish losers. Douglas, shut your trap. You're under arrest. They lifting him up and put him on the incarceration cart. Asterisk asterisk asterisk. Toby the tram engine, Lucy, Brittany Crosby, Rico, Roxy, and Damona. Asterisk asterisk asterisk. Toby the tram engine, Lucy, Brittany Crosby, Rico, Roxy, and Damona were going down the tracks. Toby was built by James Holden at the Great Eastern Railway's Stratford Works in Stratford, London, England on June 30, 1914. He originally lived at Great Yarmouth Docks, Norfolk with his brothers. Sometime between June 1939 and January 1948, Toby was chosen to be an attraction at a seaside village's festival, and was repainted and polished for the event. However, After helping their branch line's engine, and seeing how smart he looked, the branch line was afraid that he would show them up, and didn't let him join in the festival. After that he worked on an unnamed tramway in East Anglia. In 1951, Toby came to work at the quarry on Thomas's branch line after his tramway closed, as it was found to be illegal for Thomas to go on the quarry tram road without side plates or cow catchers. At first, Toby was teased by James for his shabby paint. However, James stopped teasing him after he crashed into some tar wagons. Toby also got into a bit of trouble with a diesel shunter named Mavis, as she was unwilling to shunt trucks where they needed to be placed. After an accident, the two engines made up their quarrel and became good friends. When Mavis was sent to the works after her accident with a lorry, Toby did her work at the quarry, leaving Percy to do Toby's work as well as his own. Toby once came off the rails at a crossing when the earth was swollen over the rails and ended up on the road. Luckily, with the fireman guiding the driver, they managed to reverse Toby back on the rails. The Fat Controller, however, heard about it, but rather than being cross, he only joked with him and told him that he should leave the roads to what they were made for. By 2007, Toby was having trouble taking the workmen to the quarry as Henrietta did not have enough room in her to carry them all at once. Bertie usually helped, but one day, he was ill and Henrietta was so full that some workmen even had to ride on her balcony. As he went past a part of his line that went through a town, he stopped quickly when a car came out of a side street and nearly collided with him. To make matters worse, a policeman witnessed the workman riding on Henrietta's balcony, and after he made a report, an inspector spoke to the quarry manager, telling him that passengers were not allowed to ride on coach balconies. Luckily, Thomas managed to help Toby when he found an old and worn-out coach named Victoria, who was used as a summer house for many years when she was taken out of service. Victoria was eventually restored and now works with Toby and Henrietta along their line. When the horrid lorries arrived on the island, Toby found his work at the quarry being taken over by Lorry 2 and his work at the mill being taken over by Lorry 3. When the two lorries became damaged and sent back to the docks, Toby threw Lorry 2's remarks about usefulness back at him. After many weeks of rain, Toby inspected a dam for potential damage due to rising floodwaters along his branch line. While crossing the dam, Toby found that it was breaking and tried to return to safety, but the dam collapsed just as Toby was crossing a wooden bridge, which broke off and carried Toby toward a waterfall. Harold managed to drop one end of a rope to Toby and the other end to Percy, who pulled Toby to safety. Afterwards, a party was held for Toby and the Fat Controller praised Toby's bravery. When taking the Fat Controller and his grandchildren to the seaside, the Fat Controller decided to use Toby for an exploration in search of a castle, which they found as well as a mine. Toby was scared of the mine's spooky atmosphere, certain it was haunted, and stayed on guard at night during the restoration. Thomas told Toby about the old warrior ghost, who was really a narrow-gauge engine named Bertram. After this, the two engines became good friends and now take visitors to and from the castle and mine. Toby once took Sir Topham Hatt's family on vacation again, this time to a small river inlet. Toby has had several winter escapades. The thick fog concealed Thomas's crash site from Toby's view and the foghorn had been damaged from the landslide Thomas had crashed into. Luckily, Cyril the fogman managed to place a detonator on the rails to warn Toby just in time. During the holidays, Toby was unable to clear the snowdrifts by himself, so he needed Thomas's help to deliver a Christmas tree to the festivities on his branch line. During one harsh winter, Toby had to rescue Farmer McColl's lambs that were trapped on a hillside. Toby was given a temporary 3-chime whistle while his bell was being cleaned at the steam works. It helped with warning Thomas and Gordon that the tracks were blocked. He once was scared of Knapford Junction. He once ran out of coal while delivering scrap to Croc's scrapyard, and after a few unsuccessful attempts at stopping passing engines to ask for some of their coal, Reg decided to lift Toby into the air so that the next engine would see him. Unfortunately, Thomas passed by and thought Reg was about to scrap Toby. After the story spread across the island, Emily took Henrietta to the scrapyard so that she and Toby could explain the truth. In Sodier's Legend of the Lost Treasure, Thomas nearly collided with Toby while racing Birdie. The next morning, Toby attempted to warn Thomas about his red signal, but Thomas was too late to stop and collided with Emily and derailed Gordon's coaches. Thomas tried to blame him along with Gordon and Emily, but Sir Topham Hatt saw through his lie. In the 20th series, Toby met Philip for the first time and was rather taken aback by the box gab's talkative nature and desire to have races. Philip also had mistaken Toby as a box gab before realizing Toby was a steam tram. Later, he told Thomas the trees look very spooky. Toby told Thomas and Percy that reminded the others about how the littlest goat survived by going across the bridge first and told the troll to eat his bigger brothers. In the 21st series, after Toby took Henrietta to the steamworks to get her seats refurbished, he was given a replacement carriage named Hannah. Hannah ordered him to go faster down the line and pushed him down Gordon's hill, nearly making him derail. He got fed up with Hannah and abandoned her on a siding beside the main line. When he returned to the siding to fetch her, he saw James going fast with Hannah until she broke away and crashed into a siding. After Henrietta had her new seats fitted, he took Hannah to the steamworks to be mended, where she reunited with Henrietta and revealed to him that they were sisters. Afterwards, he began working with Henrietta once again. During the winter, Toby was taking some trucks when he was diverted into a siding to avoid colliding with Donald and Douglas. In doing so, he ended up running into a snowbank, and while his driver dug him out, he had a beard of snow on his face for the rest of the day. He also took some holidaymakers to the Anafa quarry instead of the seaside after he became confused because of the new PA system which was not working properly. Temporarily, he took over Stephen's job while he was at the steamworks, but was ridiculed by his passengers. He later changed their minds when he stopped the theft of King Godred's crown. In the film, after Dieselton eavesdropped on Thomas and Percy talking about the buffers to the Magic Railroad, Toby told them to carry on taking the mail train while he followed him to the smelter's yard. There, he distracted Dieselton by ringing his bell, which resulted in Dieselton demolishing the shed that he, Splatter and Dodge were in. Toby, I heard you all went to other planets. Lucy, we sure did, Toby. It was so awesome. Brittany, it's really cool going to other planets and doing all kinds of things. Roxy, going to other planets has been a majorly educational experience for all of us. Demona, it sure has. Riku, I love going to other worlds and planets. We learn so much that no human can ever learn. Toby, I believe it, guys. They then arrived at a salt mine and they saw a salt wagon. Salt wagon, Toby the weakling. Toby, shut up. You are under arrest. They brought him onto the cart. Asterisk asterisk asterisk. Edward the Blue Engine, Lenny, Carly Beth Caldwell, Sabrina Mason, Carey, Musa, and Zian. Asterisk asterisk asterisk. Edward the Blue Engine, Lenny, Carly Beth Caldwell, Sabrina Mason, Carey, Musa, and Zian were riding the tracks. Edward was built by Sharp, Stewart and Company at their Atlas Works in Glasgow, Scotland in 1896. He worked on the Furness Railway's Cumbrian coastline before coming to Sodier on loan with other engines in 1915 to assist with the building of the North Western Railway. The Furness had found him to be a shy steamer and were not interested in getting him back when his work was completed. In 1921, they sold him to the NWR for a nominal sum, who have, by careful maintenance and extensive modifications, turned him into a reliable engine. By 1923, Edward was confined to Vicarstown sheds, to the delight of the other engines, who claimed that he was too old and weak to work. Edward was eventually let out again and proved that what he lacked in strength, he made up for in work by pushing a stubborn Gordon and his heavy goods train up Gordon's Hill in 1923. In 1923, when Thomas was fed up with fetching coaches for the big engines, Edward offered Thomas to take his trucks. However, Thomas, having no experience with trucks, was pushed down a hill and diverted into a siding. Later in 1925, Edward helped James doublehead a passenger train when the splendid red engine was acting out. For some time afterwards, Edward was getting so old that his parts caused him to clank as he went along, which led to the bigger engines teasing him about his age. Gordon and Henry teased him about when a group of cows caused half of his cattle trucks to break away and derail, but later got their comeuppance when they encountered a cow named Bluebell on a bridge. Later in 1953, Edward saved an old traction engine named Trevor from scrap when he encouraged the Vicar of Wellsworth to buy him. However, in 1954, James would still talk down to Edward's age and how slow he is, but after he was left running down the main line without a driver thanks to two naughty boys who played with his controls, Edward proved himself to be a hero when he brought the inspector and James fireman to slow him down. James could not thank Edward enough for his heroic actions, and the Fat Controller sent Edward to the works to have his worn parts mended as a reward. When Edward came back, everyone was very pleased to see him again. In 1948, Edward received his own branch line and had two twin-tank engines named Bill and Ben help take trucks from the Sodier China Clay Company to Brehm along his line. When the twins were playing tricks on a new diesel named Boko in 1965, Edward put a stop to it and showed Boko how to handle them. Soon, Edward and Gordon were both talking about branch lines, most to the disapproval of Gordon. That night there was a mishap at Tidmouth, which in favor Edward's train went first, which sent him down the main line. This was caused when the signalman at Wellsworth was not informed of the delay, and Gordon went down to Brehm. Some few evenings later, when Edward was taking a passenger train filled with enthusiasts home to Tidmouth, his crank pin snapped, damaging his wheel splasher and running plate, forcing the driver and fireman to take them off. However, Edward was able to pull the heavy train back to Tidmouth, very late, but with triumph. Boko looked after Edward's branch line while Edward was sent to the works again for repairs. In 1988, while the Elsbridge River Bridge was being repaired, Edward helped Thomas settle in on his branch line. Later, while taking China clay trucks to Wellsworth, the rear of his train derailed on a section of loose rail. Luckily, Trevor was nearby and was able to warn him about it. In 1995, before the 50th anniversary of the railway series, Edward was hurrying along his branch line after being delayed by James. He loosened one of his bogie wheels on a set of points, which came off and landed in a field of cabbages. He was repaired in time for the Golden Jubilee and lead Pip and Emma to Tidmouth as the Royal Train, and getting held up at Knapford Junction after the points and signals failed. In 2007, when an old coach named Victoria was being restored, Edward quickly recognized her from the Furness Railway and listened to her story about when she worked with a tank engine named Albert on his branch line, alongside another coach named Helena. Edward later took her to Knapford Junction for Thomas to take to Tobu. When Trevor was to be the main star attraction for the Vicar's Garden Party, Edward wanted to help but did not know how. His chance came when the Vicar forgot to promote the party by putting up the posters, so he suggested having them put up on his cab and coaches as part of the party's advertisement. His plan worked, and so many people came to the party that they raised a lot of money for the children. The Vicar later thanked Edward and his crew for their idea. Edward has a penchant for telling spooky stories on Halloween that the other engines enjoy. In the 5th series episode Haunted Henry, Edward told Henry that whenever an owl hoots, a mist rolls in, and when the mist is about, there is a ghost about too. In the 6th series episode Scaredy Engines, he told them a story of a ghost engine that returns to the smelters in search of his lost whistle every Halloween. In addition to running his branch line, Edward often acts as a banker for other engines up Gordon's Hill to help them when their trains are too heavy. In spite of Edward's great history with the railway and his good relationship with the other engines, his old age makes some engines think that he is unreliable. Gordon would always still tease and talk down about him, even going as far as suggesting that he should retire. When Percy told his driver about this, who told the Fat Controller, he arranged for Edward to show Stepney how to run the loop line, while Duck did his work. Unfortunately, Duck got stuck on Gordon's Hill when the troublesome trucks held him back. When Gordon came behind him, he could not push Duck up the hill. Edward was sent to help the double train up, and when they arrived at Knapford Station, the Fat Controller rebuked Gordon for his horrible comments about Edward. Gordon apologized to Edward the following day, and from then on, he never suggested him retiring. Since then, Edward's skill as a banker is always valued among Gordon and the others, as seen in Edward the Great and You Can Do It, Toby. In Chickens to School, Edward exclaimed, "I'm always helping Gordon up the hill." However, his speed left a lot to be desired. In As Good as Gordon, Emily had to wait for Edward at the crossing. Impatient, Emily snidely told him to hurry up, calling him slow coach. When Spencer visited the island of Sodier and beat Gordon's record, he insulted the Sidrian engines, who became fed up with Spencer's boastfulness. They wanted to race Spencer to the Duke and Duchess of Boxford's summer house, but the Fat Controller chose Edward to go there instead. Gordon thought that Edward should not be doing an express engine's job, and James thought that Edward would let the whole railway down. Regardless, Edward tried his best and had several moments of triumph during the race. Gordon saw how hard Edward was trying and took back his earlier words, encouraging Edward instead, calling him a credit to the railway. Edward eventually won due to Spencer falling asleep and felt like the pride of the Sodier Railway, and he was right. Edward has always been a kind and wise engine, though in some scenarios, he has acted a bit judgmental to newcomers. For example, in Harvey to the Rescue, he claimed that Harvey doesn't even look like an engine. In Thomas and the New Engine, he was one of the engines to spread rumors that Neville wanted to bump the steam engines. In Edward Strikes Out, he agreed with Gordon's element of doubt about Rocky and called him a newfangled nonsense. The narration at the episode's start reveals that this is because Edward has worked on Sodier the longest. In both the first and third of these scenarios, Edward learned of Harvey and Rocky's usefulness by their episode's ends. In Calling All Engines, Edward acted so discriminate towards Diesel, Airy, and Bird and blamed them for collecting the wrong building material for the new Tidmouth sheds. In Edward and the Mail, he did not want to embarrass himself in front of the other engines, so he tried to take the mail train without asking Percy, who was in need of repairs, for advice, resulting in him delivering the mail to all the wrong places. Edward has also acted excitable in some episodes. In the 12th series episode, Steady Eddie, he was given a task of taking the new water wheel to Great Waterville. He ignored the Fat Controller's advice to take the express track, took all the bumpy tracks to show off, and resulted in the water wheel almost being scrapped. In Thomas and the Runaway Kite, he wanted to help Thomas to chase after the Fat Controller's grandchildren's kite. Since then, Edward has tried to regain his usual self, which one day made Charlie think he was too old to have fun in Charlie and Eddie. Edward was upset about this, so he tried to be as fun as Charlie, but this only caused even more trouble. Since then, he has just stuck to being the wise and kind engine that he was of old. In the 15th series, Edward was sent to work with Harold for the day, being given the chance to be a hero. After observing Gordon and Rocky in action, Edward resolved to fulfill his hero role by being strong and fast and stern. On his way to the Sodier Search and Rescue Center, Edward found a miserable Charlie and cheered him up by telling him a joke, collected Dowager Hat's suitcase when it was sent to the wrong station, and rescued a lost Katie the sheepdog. Edward was still determined to be what he thought a hero, but found that his time spent helping others had made him late for Harold, who was not at the rescue center when Edward chuffed in. The Fat Controller reassured Edward that being kind, funny and gentle was Edward being himself, enough to be a hero, and everyone cheered for him. Harold arrived looking for Edward, who just smiled. In the 18th series, he was still being teased by Gordon, who thought he was unreliable for breaking down frequently, but Edward claimed that he had not broken down in ages. When Gordon later got stuck on his hill, Edward came to push him. As they reached the top of the hill, Gordon just carried on without saying thank you. Edward complained about Gordon's ungratefulness to Thomas, who came up with a plan. Thomas challenged Gordon to a race across the island. As Gordon nearly caught him up, Thomas pulled onto the same track, which meant Gordon had no choice but to follow him. At Gordon's hill, the two engines were going so slowly that Gordon stopped and got stuck again. As Thomas carried on his way, Edward arrived. This time, it was Edward's turn to call Gordon unreliable for always getting stuck on his own hill. Edward then began to carry on his way too, but Gordon begged him to help. Gordon promised to never call him old and unreliable again. Edward forgave Gordon and gave him a push. The big blue engine even said thank you once they had reached the top of the hill. In Sodier's legend of the lost treasure, he told Thomas, who was being mended at the steam works, that Rocky had discovered a pirate ship in the cavern in which Thomas had fallen into earlier, despite Thomas discovering it first. Later, while working at the docks, Salty told him, Henry, James, Porter and Cranky about a lost pirate. When Thomas felt that Max and Monty's recklessness was going too far, Edward told Thomas to ignore them. He laughed at Thomas, Percy, and Toby for being scared of a cow which they thought was a troll, and he was also scared of going out in the night when the engines thought a glowing Henry was a ghost. Edward was among the engines who were afraid Hugo was the start of steam engines being replaced. In the Great Race, Edward was one of the many engines who wanted to go to the Great Railway Show but instead was left on Sodier. When Henry had an accident at Vickerstown on the viaduct, while taking a goods train to the mainland, Edward took Judy and Jerome to the accident scene that evening, where they lifted Henry back to safety. In the 21st series, Edward arrived at Knapp Ford to pick up the old public service announcement system which the Fat Controller had just replaced and took it to Croc's scrap yard. When Thomas, Percy, and Toby could not understand the new PA system and took the trains to the wrong places, they tried to fix it, but it became badly burned out and no longer working. Edward then returned to Croc's scrapyard to have Reg urgently return the old public service announcement. When Edward brought it back, the Fat Controller praised him for saving the old public service announcement. When his shed was being repaired after James had an accident, Edward was sent to Philip's shed, then the steamworks and Brendam docks, but they were all too noisy for him to get a good night's sleep. He later found Philip to be good company and decided that he would stay with him at Wellsworth Sheds instead of Tidmouth from then on. When Bill and Ben made up a game called Hunt the Truck and played it on Nia, Edward threatened to take the trucks he brought for them away if they did not give back the truck to Nia. When Bill and Ben tried to hide an important truck from Edward, the wise old engine knew what the twins were up to and took the truck from where they already hid it. He would later pretend to be worried that the truck going missing would ruin Sir Robert Noramby's Christmas party, prompting the twins to search for it without realizing that Edward had set up his own trick for them. Edward, so Lenny, I heard you make awesome clothes for everyone. Lenny, that's totes right. Carre, Japanese accent, that is correct. Lenny is an amazing fashion designer. Sabrina Mason, she makes an amazing line of clothes. Musa, she sure does. Edward, I heard you were terrorized by an evil haunted masked Carly Beth. Carly Beth, I was. That was a horrible nightmare. Zian, it sure was. Edward, I'm sorry that happened to you. Carly Beth, that's all right. They went up to an oil field and they saw tankers and they went up to one. Edward, hold it right there. Oil tanker, Edward the blue weakling. Lenny, you are in a lot of trouble. Edward, what she said. You're under arrest. They picked up the tanker. Asterisk asterisk asterisk. We rendezvoused back at the station and we put all the troublesome trucks in our special prison for bad trucks and trains. It was the Sodier Train and Vehicle Maximum Security Correctional Institute. The mischief of the troublesome trucks was over. Storm caught her first ever Pokemon, Cast Form. It can change due to the weather. We moved the island of Sodier to North America and extended it all with the American Transcontinental Railroad, and we also built a massive railroad system all over the world, and it was an immense project, and we also built a train bridge over the Bering Strait and it was a huge success. We overcame a lot of transportation problems. It was a massive project and it was a success. The end. Asterisk asterisk asterisk. Another fanfiction and more mischief makers brought to justice. Thomas the Tank Engine and Friends is a very popular show I remember watching a lot back when I was a little kid. It was so awesome. The reason we did this is because I was doing submissions for Thomas the Tank Engine and Friends. I also did this chapter for my friends Thumperfan and Blue Sonic Mania. This chapter is for you guys. Nico-chan11 gave me the ideas for this one. Thanks man as usual. Let me know what you all think. See you all next time. Thomas the Tank Engine and Friends is owned by Reverend William Audrey, his son Christopher, Britt Allcroft, and many companies.